Turn off the light. Noah won't be home tonight. I froze behind the half-closed door when I saw my son's fiancée standing between my husband's legs, his hands wrapped tightly around her waist. My throat closed up, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it might tear through my chest. I stood still like a trespasser in my own home. Then I pulled out my phone and hit record. Just as I was about to burst in, I saw Noah, my son, standing at the end of the hallway, his face calm in a way that chilled me to the bone. He whispered, "Mom, I already know, and what I found out is far worse than anything you could imagine. If you're still listening, tell me where you're watching from. Every comment you leave is another mark in this journey. And if this story has touched you, don't forget to hit like so it can reach even further." I'm Marion Whitaker, 66 years old, owner of the Blue Ridge Hearth Inn, a small inn tucked against a pine forest on the edge of Asheville, North Carolina. People say this place smells like cinnamon and pine every morning, warm like its name, Hearth. With these hands, I scrubbed the red bricks, hand-sewed every curtain, and hung deep red geranium baskets along the balcony. That morning, I woke while the fog was still low. The oven was just hot enough for a batch of buttermilk waffles, and the coffee dark roast from a small roastery on Haywood Street was dripping steadily into the pot. My routine rarely changes: proof the dough the night before, roll it out in the morning, and turn on the local radio about mountain weather. I've always believed small habits keep you steady. Life in your later years needs that kind of discipline. Gerald, my husband of 43 years, usually gets up early to help me set out trays and check the hot water lines. This morning he vanished, leaving a hurried note, down to the basement to check the pipes, heard a hiss. Don't worry. In a century-old house like this, hisses and little clicks in the pipes are normal. They're like the size of old wood. I didn't question it. I dusted sugar over the waffles, opened the kitchen window to let in the mountain mist, and glanced at the wall clock, 6:15 a.m. Tessa, my son, Noah's fiancée, said last night she'd sleep in the main house so she could try on her wedding dress with a local seamstress at the morning. She said the natural light in the living room is better than a studio. I agreed. Noah was staying at his apartment near the new brewery, convenient for work and to keep things traditional before the wedding. I had carefully pressed an ivory silk robe and had Tessa embroidered on the cuff as a welcome gift for my future daughter-in-law. The coffee was steaming, and guests in the first 3 rooms had requested breakfast at 7 a.m. I carried a fruit tray, planning to walk down the hall to the big fridge near the living room. And that's when a thread-thin whisper drifted out from the half-open door. Not the radio, not wood ticking, a voice soft, low, and intimate in the way I'd heard all my life with my husband. My hand paused on the knob, the other hand tugging at my apron. I didn't knock. A woman's intuition, or maybe basic self-preservation, kept me still. I leaned in. Just a narrow strip of light, but enough. Gerald sat on the edge of the living room settee, the blue shirt I had just ironed 2 days ago unbuttoned to the 3rd button. Tessa stood between his legs, hair loosely tied. The silk robe I'd given her, yes, that one parted just enough for Gerald's hand to rest on her waist. It was too clear to fool myself with any other words. I heard Tessa's breath-soft voice, "Turn off the lights. Noah won't be home tonight." Hearing my son's name in that scene hit me in the chest like a hammer. In one heartbeat, my whole life, 3 decades at the stove, our first winter after buying this place, the nights counting every saved dollar turned into the backdrop for a cruel joke. I didn't scream. I didn't shove the door. I didn't scratch or grab something to throw. I pulled out my phone, hit record, my palm cold like it had touched ice water. Partly instinct to preserve evidence, partly because I knew my shouting would only blow apart the hearth I had spent years tending. I backed away, placing each step like a thief in my own home, afraid even a small cough would shatter the mask being worn in there. As I turned, I saw a figure at the end of the hall, tall, lean, shoulders drooping like he'd been carrying something too heavy. Noah. My son's face was paper pale, but his eyes were strangely calm, the kind of calm you have after you walk through the storm first and come back to guide someone else. He didn't touch me, he just raised 2 fingers, a small shh gesture, and tilted his head toward the back door. I nodded, mouth dry, legs shaking so much I had to brace against the darkened timber wall. We passed the row of family photos, Christmas at the ski lot, Grandpa's birthday, Noah in his cap and gown moments that were once warm, now looked like shattered glass. The back porch met us with the smell of pine resin, birds in the woods, and the neighbor's mower far off. I gripped the wooden arm of the chair, waiting for my hands to stop shaking. "How long?" I asked, my voice so hoarse I barely recognized it. 3 months, Noah said, swallowing something like a stone stuck in his throat. He didn't look at me, he looked past my shoulder, to the blue-green ridges in the distance, like his next words needed the whole Blue Ridge to hold them up. "And there's worse." I waited. There are moments when you know you're standing at a cliff edge, and what you're about to hear decides whether you fall or fly. "I didn't want you to find out like this," Noah said, his calm voice running over a fierce current. "I tried to keep things steady for you. But—" He stopped, reached into his jacket, and pulled out a thick envelope. Inside were screenshots, emails, and a few powers of attorney signed Marion E. Whitaker, my name but not my hand, like someone had learned to write my name almost perfectly, except for one tiny mistake only I'd know, the one in Marion I always hook it, a habit from high anim school. On those papers it was a straight, nail-like line. I felt the blood drain from my face. "Gerald set up an LLC called Whitaker Hearth LLC 2 years ago," Noah said, voice flat like reading test results. "Then use those powers of attorney to transfer pieces of the inn's interests into it. Tessa, did you know she used to work for Summit Vista Holdings? They scoop up historic homes and turn them into boutique resorts." A dizzy wave made the scene tilt for a second. The wooden chairs, the wind chime, the freshly watered geraniums all snapped back into place. My trust didn't. "Why?" I asked the dumbest and truest question of my life. "For money?" Noah pressed his lips together. "To sell, Mom. To sell the Hearth Inn. Prices are up because of the new road. Summit Vista floated a strategic partnership. We keep a minority stake, they take operations, then in a few years they swallow it all." He exhaled. I ended it with Tessa in my head the moment I knew. "But I didn't want you shattered. I thought waiting until after the wedding would keep things quieter. Then I gathered proof, found an attorney. I wanted to protect you first." I looked at my hands. Knuckles thin, callous at the base of my thumb from years with a wooden spoon, sunspots from watering plants. These hands built a place called Hearth. I set them on the chair's arm, letting the cool wood pull me out of the shock. "What do we do?" I asked, then remembered this was only the start of the storm. "I've reached Avery Chen," Noah said, "an attorney who does real estate and signature fraud. We can meet today. But Mom—" He paused, and for the first time his steady eyes wavered. "Can you handle it? You'll have to act like you don't know bias time. You'll have to look at them and say nothing." I took a deep breath. The briny pine and coffee in my mouth held me steady. From the back porch I could see into the living room, where the first light painted a gold stripe across the patterned rug I found at a flea market 10 years ago. I heard cups clink on a tray, probably Gerald pouring coffee. I heard Tessa's small laugh, the one I used to think was a shy girl's. Every familiar sound warped like a dream heard through water. "I've kept this hearth burning for 40 years, I said, surprised my voice was as solid as the wood under my hand. "I can stand a few more days, to save it." I lifted my chin and met my son's eyes. "From now on, not one brick of the Hearth Inn ends up in their hands." Noah nodded, that calm settling back on him like a coat he puts on to shield me. Then I'll call Avery. I'll get the files ready. And he lowered his voice. Mom, don't be alone with them unless you have to. I'll be around. I stood, smoothed my apron, and straightened my hair clip. I looked at my brown leather flats, worn at the outer heel habit of a kitchen worker who moves fast. Let's go, I said. Guests will be down for breakfast. The hearth still has to burn. I walked back in and opened the door wide like it had never been closed. The smell of coffee and buttered sugar greeted me like any morning. The only difference was my heart knew. And as I set the fruit platter on the counter and heard Gerald's steps on the stairs, I understood the last peaceful morning of my life had just ended quietly, like a flame shifting color before it flares. Noah didn't say anything else out on the porch. He motioned for me to follow, down the hall, and opened the small office at the end. I rarely went in there. Gerald used to say it was Noah's space for grad school papers. Later, my son kept the habit of locking the metal file cabinet and never letting me touch it. Today, that door opened, and I realized my child had been preparing something much bigger than I imagined. The room was dim bright with early sun through burlap curtains. Old wood and printer paper smell tightened my chest because I knew I was about to face the truth. Noah knelt and turned the dial on a black safe against the wall. Metal clicks echoed in the quiet, and my insides clenched. A few seconds later, the door swung open. Noah pulled out a thick, worn-edged envelope and set it in front of me, sliding it over like a ritual of handing over evidence. I dragged a wooden chair closer and, hands shaking, opened it. Out fell pages, message screenshots, credit card statements, printed emails. In a few photos I saw Gerald's number on the screen, with syrupy texts to Tessa. Miss you tonight. Room 307 is set. I read and felt my heart sink beat by beat. Those locations were all local hotels, places Gerald told me he had to stop by to meet a table linen supplier or look at lumber for repairs. Everyone lined up with times he was gone, leaving me alone with the hearth. I found this 3 months ago, Noah said quietly, eyes on the desk, voice even like he was trying to keep me from collapsing. At first I thought it was dumb flirting, but when the hotel bookings matched Dad's trips, I couldn't deny it. I folded my fingers, nails biting my palms to stop the shaking. Did you say anything to Tessa? I tried to keep my voice steady, though my chest hurt. Noah nodded. I confronted her. At first she denied it, said I was paranoid. When I showed her the photos, she changed tone right away. She said, I didn't need to be miserable, that it could be a 3-way arrangement if I played along. He let out a harsh, metal-on-metal laugh. I walked out. From that day, I knew this wedding was a con. I opened my mouth, but my throat closed. In the stack, I suddenly saw a few legal authorizations. At the bottom, Marion E. Whitaker sat clear and bold. My hand jerked, my heart felt squeezed. The writing looked so real I touched it to be sure it wasn't mine, but I saw the tell. In Marion has always had a soft hook. Here it was a stiff, flat line. I looked up, gasping. They forged my signature. Noah nodded, anger flashing. I think Dad's been doing this for a while. He set up a company called Whitaker Hearth LLC 2 years back. Since then, he's been quietly shifting assets from the inn into it, using those forged authorizations to paper it over. My ears rang. The familiar wood walls felt like they were closing in. I whispered, So, it's not just an affair? No, Mom, Noah said, voice hardening. Tessa isn't the sweet girl you thought. Before coming to the U.S., she worked for Summit Vista Holdings, a company that scoops up heritage buildings and turns them into luxury resorts. To them, the Blue Ridge Hearth Inn is just a rare commodity. Prime location, historic architecture, values soaring. Tessa was sent here, and Dad went along. A cold line ran down my spine. In my head flickered the porch where I embroidered pillows, the stone steps Gerald and I chipped out years ago, the white rose garden I tend every spring. All of it bait for someone else to price, weigh, and sell off. I looked at my son. So, their plan? The wedding? Just to legitimize it? Noah gripped the desk edge, pain and anger lighting his eyes. Exactly. The ceremony is just theater. After the wedding, they'd have a legal path to control everything, then sell it all. And after that, he paused, lips tight. They'd disappear, Mom. Disappear with everything we spent a lifetime building. I couldn't say another word. In that moment, I knew the thin piece I'd clung to for decades had cracked for good. Every memory, every drop of sweat, every year Gerald and I stacked to build this home was being haggled over on a stranger's table. I put my hands on the stack of papers and looked straight at Noah. Well then, son, if they've scripted our lives, it's our turn to rewrite the ending. I bent down, hands trembling slightly as I turned each page in the file Noah had prepared. On the cover, the bold line read, "Strategic Partnership Proposal." It sounded flashy, but a few lines in and I knew this wasn't partnership, it was a disguised takeover. People say dry documents never lie, and when they're right in front of you, they feel like an indictment. They planned to turn my home, the Blue Ridge Hearth Inn, into a premium travel product, a cold phrase with no heart in it. I thought about the last few years, how the land around Asheville heated up day by day. The new road made it easier for tourists from Atlanta and Charlotte to get here, and bit by bit the area became a favorite for deep-pocketed buyers, snapping up old houses and small hotels to flip into resorts. I used to be proud that our little Hearth Inn kept its original warmth, so different from the glossy hotels springing up nearby. Now it turns out that very authenticity made it a rare commodity. They looked and saw profit. I looked and saw a lifetime of memories. Gerald's words echoed in my head those times he sat on the porch with a beer and blurted, "Wish we could just sell it all. Head to Florida, buy a house on the beach. No worries, just sun and waves." I laughed back then, thinking he was joking, because for 40 years he seemed tied to these mountains. Turns out it wasn't idle talk. It was a real dream, and Tessa turned it into a lever. My throat went dry as I wondered when the man I trusted became someone who could betray so easily. Noah sat across from me, eyes sad but steady. He started from the beginning, wanting me to see it clearly. Tessa didn't just happen into his life. In the culinary class at Biltmore, she approached him first, made friends first, and slowly slid into every corner of Noah's life. "Do you remember the first time I brought Tessa home?" She went on about loving old houses and family dinners by the fire, Noah asked. And I remembered. I'd been happy then, thinking my son had found a soulful girl who valued tradition. Now I know those were rehearsed lines meant to soften me up. The more I listened, the clearer it felt like a pre-written play. Love at first glance in class, a quick engagement, then Gerald and Tessa handling paperwork, and finally selling Hearth Inn to Summit Vista Holdings. Each step locked into the next with a cold precision. A shiver ran through me. What was my role? The gentle, blind mother who'd nod on the wedding day, smile for photos, then get quietly pushed out of the home she built. It was all scripted, just waiting for me to hit my marks. Noah lowered his head, voice tight but firm. "I decided a while ago I'm not marrying Tessa. I didn't say it yet because I wanted you safe first. If I broke it off suddenly, she and Dad would know something's up and might do something reckless." I looked at my son and saw both the child I once lulled to sleep by the fire and the man ready to carry the weight to protect his mother. My nose stung. I set my hand on the table and drew a deep breath. "Noah, I won't let anyone take even a single brick from Hearth Inn. This is our home, our blood, our tears, all the years we've poured into it. If they want to steal it, they'll have to get through me first." The words came out like a vow. I never imagined I'd face my husband and future daughter-in-law as enemies, but I'd never felt a fire this strong inside me either. We sat for hours in that small office, the wall clock ticking between each sentence. In the end, we made a decision: find an independent attorney with no ties to Gerald or anyone around here. And do it quietly, step by solid step, without tipping our hand. One small mistake and they'd get suspicious and speed things up. I pulled an old notebook from the drawer. From that day, I started logging everything: dates, times, the tiniest details when Gerald was gone, who Tessa called, things they said when they thought I couldn't hear. I wrote like a witness in my own home, building a file no one could deny. My pen sometimes shook, but line by line the writing sharpened, like carving into stone. Every time I closed the notebook, I looked around the room. The hand-built shelves, the fireplace where generations of guests had gathered, the windows opening onto the garden I've tended plant by plant, all of it seemed to whisper, "Don't let us disappear." And I promised myself Noah and our family's past, this is a fight I am not allowed to lose. We met attorney Avery Chen in a small office downtown, on the second floor of a red brick building more than half a century old. Sunlight poured through a big window, but inside it was calm and almost solemn, just the sound of pages turning and a pen sliding over old wood. Avery, an Asian American man in his 40s, had sharp eyes and a steady voice. I'd heard he specialized in real estate and signature fraud, that's why Noah had booked him. He listened without interruption, nodding or jotting notes now and then. He examined every document from Noah, lingering long over the signatures with my name. When everything lay in a neat stack, he looked up at me and said firmly, "Mrs. Whitaker, this shows clear signs of forgery, fraud, and unlawful asset transfer. This isn't just a family dispute. It's criminal behavior." The words cut like a blade, painful but also a relief. Finally, someone saw and named what Gerald and Tessa were doing. I didn't have to doubt myself anymore. Avery continued, "The best plan now is to file a civil action at the county court and request an emergency order to freeze all transactions tied to the Blue Ridge Hearth Inn. If granted, no one can transfer, sell, or mortgage the property until the court rules." Noah exhaled, and my heart pounded. I asked, "How soon would that order take effect?" Avery said, "If we prep the evidence, a few days. Meanwhile, I'll notify local banks and the county recorder to flag any suspicious activity. That way we lock the front door and bolt the side ones." I clenched both hands in my lap. Gerald wouldn't take it well if all his exits got sealed. As if reading my mind, Avery leaned in, voice slow but serious. "You should be prepared. When people sense their plan is threatened, they may try to wipe evidence, burn documents, destroy contracts, or move money fast. It's common in cases like this." A chill ran down my spine. For years I believed we had nothing to hide, and this house was the safest place on earth. Now I had to consider my husband might turn into the one to destroy it all with fire or worse. I glanced at Noah and saw his brow pinched with worry. I drew a long breath and said clearly, "If we want to protect Hearth Inn, we have to act normal. I'll keep cooking breakfast, greeting guests, smiling like always. The more they believe I don't know, the more time we get." Noah turned to me, voice nearly breaking. "Are you sure you can handle that?" "Seeing them every day, pretending in front of the man who betrayed you, I'm afraid it'll wear you down." I took my work-roughened hand and set it over his, strong but tired. "Noah," I whispered, "I built this place with these hands. The walls, the bricks, the boards, my sweat is in them. If I have to pretend a few more days to save it, I can. This isn't the first time I've been patient to protect our family." Pride and hurt flashed in Noah's eyes. He nodded, then looked at Avery. "Only the three of us know everything. No one else. We want to keep the circle tight." Avery nodded. "Good. The fewer who know, the safer. I'll handle all filings myself. In parallel, I'll contact Lieutenant Mateo Ramirez at the police department." When the threshold is met, they'll open a formal criminal investigation. For now, we keep it quiet. Hearing Ramirez's name reminded me of Tandid. Seeing him at community events, a tall Mexican-American man with a steady, serious gaze. I'd heard he was relentless in property fraud cases. Knowing he'd be in charge made me feel like the law was a shield at my back. We wrapped after more than 2 hours. When we stepped out of Avery's office, Asheville's sky had turned gray, heavy clouds signaling a hard rain. I pulled up my scarf and looked toward the mountains, a strange surge of resolve rising in me. For the first time since I discovered the betrayal, I didn't feel like an abandoned wife or a dismissed mother. I felt like the owner of Hearth Inn and I would fight to keep it. Noah drove home in silence. Only when the inn's familiar roofs came into view did I say softly, "From now on, we're in a big play. Remember, every look, every gesture can be scrutinized. The better we perform, the closer we get to winning." Noah tightened his grip on the wheel, tense but resolute. "You won't be acting alone. I'm here." I looked out the window at the garden I've tended for decades. Beds, trees, grass, everything stood quiet, witnesses to what I was about to defend. A silent vow rose in me. No matter who they are or how slick their plan is, I won't let a single brick of the Blue Ridge Hearth Inn slip from my hands. The next morning I went to the kitchen earlier than usual. The batter I'd mixed the night before just needed the oven's heat to fill the house with that warm scent. I set the table, making each move slow and natural. When Tessa came in, hair a little tousled, I smiled as if I knew nothing. "What bouquet are you thinking for the ceremony? I think peonies would suit you," I said evenly. Tessa flinched for half a second, eyes wide, then snapped back to her cheerful self. She smiled sweetly and started debating between white roses and orchids. I nodded along, pouring milk like a model mother-in-law. Inside, every word felt like a blade. Gerald walked in with his coffee. He made it his old way, extra grounds. Hardly any sugar, filling the kitchen with a bitter, harsh aroma. I watched him stir slowly, eyes dodging mine. I know his tiny habits better than anyone, and that fake, calm routine only made his anxiety show more. I pushed a little further. "While plating pastries," I said casually, "I should probably call the church and postpone the ceremony a bit. My aunt in Boston is in the hospital, and you know she treats Noah like her own. It would be awful if she couldn't be there." Tessa froze for exactly half a second, eyes wide, then nodded quickly. "Oh, I completely understand. Family comes first. We can push it a few weeks, it's fine." Her words were soft, but I saw her fingers clamp the napkin harder than usual. Gerald looked up, flicked a glance toward Noah, like he was testing for a crack. My son kept a calm face, took a bite of pastry, then shifted the topic to new breakfast options for guests. The whole table sat in a silent play, everyone understood. That afternoon, after the guests left to explore, I sat quietly in the office with a thick stack of forms. I started the application to designate the Blue Ridge Hearth Inn as a local historic property. Those dry lines about cultural value and distinctive architecture became the steel deadbolts I set on my home. If approved, any sweeping renovations or demolition plans would be stopped by law. Each sentence I wrote felt like another lock, another shield for the place that's held my life. When I signed my name, my hand was steady in a way it hadn't been for days. Marion E. Whitaker came out clear, no shake, no tilt. For the first time in days, I felt a piece of control return to me. Night fell with a light mist outside. I kept the reading room lamp on, pretending to review bookings. Then a strange whisper pulled me from the desk. I stepped softly onto the back porch, heart pounding. Tessa's voice, low and firm, cut through the dark. "We need to speed it up. The buyer's getting impatient. They want to close soon." That line, "we need to speed it up, the buyer's getting impatient," might sound like business, but in this house it was a knife in a mother's heart. What do you think when greed makes people treat family like merchandise? Leave your thoughts, sometimes. An honest comment is the best comfort for anyone who's been betrayed. I couldn't see who she was talking to, only Tessa's slim frame under the dim yellow light. I stepped back, silent. My heart hammered, but my mind was bright as a lamp. Back in the room, I opened my notebook and wrote down the time, the place, every word Tessa said. Then I snapped a photo and sent it to Avery through an encrypted app. Every line, every bit of data felt like a heavy stone I was adding to the scales of justice. That night, I lay beside Gerald, listening to his steady breathing. Outside, the mountain wind hissed through the window seams with a chill. I stared at the ceiling, feeling tension wrap around me like fog, but instead of fear, I felt a growing resolve. I knew the fight would be long, but step by step, piece by piece, Noah and I would build a wall they couldn't climb to steal our home. Tuesday morning, just after I finished breakfast for a group from Atlanta, a strange black SUV pulled up at the gate. Two men in suits stepped out with briefcases, their faces so confident they bordered on arrogant. I glanced at Gerald. He flinched, then quickly put on a calm face. Tessa stepped off the porch, voice sweet as honey. Right on time. They introduced themselves as representatives of Summit Vista Holdings, the company I'd already heard about from Avery and Noah. One, Barrow, had salt and pepper hair and a practical smile. The other, younger, with a sharp, cold gaze, was named Mendez. They talked about a strategic partnership opportunity, about keeping your family a minority stake for appearances. Each word hit like cold drops of water. It was clear Summit Vista saw Hearth Inn as a parcel to extract value from, and we were just obstacles to clear. I invited them to walk the rose garden out back. The blooms were open, the scent mild in the mountain air. I kept my voice even, telling the story of each stone in the path, even the foundation stone Gerald and I set ourselves in the summer of 1982. I hit every word like a reminder. This place isn't a commodity, it's part of my family's body. Back at the front porch, I stopped, turned to the two men, and said lightly but firmly, "My home is not for sale." It wasn't loud, but in the quiet it rang like a bell. Gerald, beside me, slid his gaze away and suddenly got busy adjusting his cuff. Tessa laughed and tried a joke. "Oh, Mom just talks tough. We all want what's best for the inn." But Noah stepped forward, standing behind me like a steady shadow. His eyes locked on Barrow and Mendez without a flicker. Barrow set his briefcase on the porch table and pulled out a thick stack of papers. "We understand the emotional attachment, but please take a look. This is just a draft MOU, a memorandum of understanding. You and your family will keep your name on the sign, but the management terms will transfer to us. That's how Hearth Inn can grow." I took the stack, flipped a few pages, and saw the cold phrases clearly. Transfer of operating control, full financial authorization. I set the papers down, looked straight at Gerald, and asked one question. "Who currently has signing authority?" The whole porch fell silent. Gerald froze, his eyes darting like he was searching for an exit. His lips moved, but nothing came out. Tessa shot him a look, clearly waiting for him to speak. But Noah answered firmly instead, calm but ringing clear. "The legal owners and signatories are Marion Whitaker and Noah Whitaker." He said each word precisely, as if drawing a line that could not be crossed. The air seemed to harden. Mendez gave a small cough. Barrow awkwardly closed the file. They looked at each other, then at Gerald, hoping for a different response. Nothing but silence. Finally, Barrow forced a smile and said, "We understand perhaps this isn't the right time. We'll be in touch." They pulled back, obviously flustered. The SUV engine roared to life and rolled slowly down the dirt road. I stood there watching, saying nothing. Beside me, Noah stood straight, like a soldier who'd just won a small battle. Tessa was different. Her face was tight, one corner of her mouth curled up, but her eyes were on fire. As soon as they left, she yanked out her phone, thumbs flying at a frantic speed. I knew those messages weren't about coffee dates. Gerald came closer, trying to play it cool. It's just negotiation, Marion. People always push for more, but it doesn't mean we're agreeing to anything. I looked at him without replying, and I could see the strain under the mask. That night, I sat alone in the office, the desk lamp shining on a notebook already thick with pages of notes. I wrote down the time, detailed the meeting, the looks, the gestures, and especially Gerald and Tessa's reactions. Then I sent an encrypted report to Avery. When I hit send, my heart felt heavy but steady. I knew after failing at my doorstep, they wouldn't take the straightforward route again. Tessa's whisper from the porch the night before kept echoing, "Speed it up, the buyer's getting impatient." I understood the next step would be the shortcut, and that meant this fight was about to get harsher than ever. That afternoon, my phone buzzed. Avery Chen's name lit the screen. I stepped onto the back porch where the breeze moved through the rose bushes and answered. His voice was calm but urgent. "Mrs. Whitaker, the court granted the emergency order. From now on, all transactions involving Blue Ridge Hearth Inn are frozen. No bank or title office will process a transfer until the case is heard." I closed my eyes and felt like an invisible shield had just risen around the house, but Avery didn't let me relax long. It also means they'll try something else. I forwarded the full file to Lieutenant Ramirez. He'll run discreet surveillance around the property to catch any moves. That night, after Noah fell asleep, I went back through my notes alone. Blue ink lines stacked with dates, times, each slip of Tessa's tongue every time Gerald disappeared. Suddenly, a new notification popped up in the secure inbox I shared with Avery. A bank statement. Withdrawals from the Whitaker Hearth LLC account the shell Gerald set up 2 years ago were being routed through a middle wallet and scattered to multiple places. I watched thousands of dollars vanish with each transaction. My hands shook, but my eyes sharpened. This wasn't personal anymore. It was proof of active laundering, clear and undeniable. The next morning, I ran into Tessa in the lobby. She was labeling 2 shiny, fancy new suitcases. When she saw me, she smiled sweetly. "I bought these for the honeymoon, but I'll probably use them for a work trip first." I just nodded, holding back questions. I was used to her double-meaning lines. That afternoon, Gerald walked into the kitchen while I was washing vegetables. He hesitated, then smiled, trying to sound casual. "Marion, it's been a while since we had a dinner out. How about tonight? Just us, like before." I turned and saw something odd in his eyes, part probing, part pleading, and part hiding. I nodded, my voice light as air. "All right." Inside, I knew. My performance was beginning. Near dusk, I went to change. I chose the dark blue dress Gerald once praised at an anniversary party, the color hugging my figure just enough the image of the wife he used to be proud to hold hands with. In the mirror, my eyes weren't the same anymore. Hurt, but also resolute, I whispered. "End it tonight, Marion. This is the last round." The plan with Noah was set. I'd leave with Gerald for dinner. But first I'd forget my purse on the table. When I went back to get it, I'd tip off Noah. He would hide in the office and turn on the new covert cameras. If Gerald and Tessa thought we were gone and rushed to haul documents, move the safe, or grab jewelry, every move would be recorded. Caught in the act, evidence stronger than any statement. I stepped into the hall and heard Noah's steps upstairs. He looked at me, worry in his eyes but steel in his stance. I leaned in and murmured, "I'm not afraid, son. We finish this." He squeezed my hand hard, then disappeared into the dark office. Before leaving, I peeked through the window. Tessa sat on the porch, texting nonstop. Her blonde hair fell forward, her face tilted down, but I knew she was talking to someone about timelines. I turned away, keeping my face calm. As Gerald drove off the lane onto the main road, I leaned back, eyes forward. Heavy dark clouds stacked over the Blue Ridge like slabs of lead. Cold air slid through the window crack, carrying a raw dampness. A storm was coming. I had one inside me too, but it wasn't fear. It was the storm of waiting. Tonight, every mask would fall. And my house, the one I built with my whole life, would be defended by truth laid bare. La Montagne sat on a quiet street a few miles from the inn. Candlelight flickered across the table, catching the crystal glasses and warming the white linen. Gerald sat across from me, suit neat, wine-colored tie. He tried to be gallant, poured the wine, and raised his glass. "Marion, you're as beautiful as ever. I'm lucky to have a wife like you." I lifted my glass, offered a small smile, but my eyes didn't waver. I set it down, leaned in, and kept my voice low, just for us. "I know everything. The flight to Miami connecting to the Bahamas, and the Shell account. Under that LLC." Gerald went still. In the candlelight, his face drained white, eyes wide like someone had ripped off a familiar mask. His hand shook around the glass. "Marion, you're misunderstanding. I'll give you a fair share. We can split it. I wasn't going to leave you." I sat straight and answered evenly. "Gerald, I'm not asking for a share of a house I built with my own hands. Blue Ridge Hearth Inn isn't yours alone, and it's not a bargaining chip." My voice was firm, each word landing like a hammer on wood. The air thickened. Gerald inhaled, eyes flashing, then ducked behind a forced smile. "You don't understand. This is an opportunity. We'll be richer than ever." His line cut off when my phone buzzed in my pocket. "Noah," I answered. His voice was a tight whisper. "Mom, they're gathering files and jewelry. Avery called the police. Ramirez and the team will be there in a few minutes." I pushed back my chair. It scraped loud against the floor. Gerald panicked. "Where are you going?" I looked him in the eye. "I have to go home." He reached out, frantic. "Marion, wait. No need to blow this up. Sit down and let me explain." I brushed his hand aside and headed for the door. I knew the thing Gerald feared most wasn't losing assets, it was me seeing, with my own eyes, what was happening in my house. We got in the car. Gerald gripped the wheel, his hands white-knuckled, veins raised. He stomped the gas. The car shot along the mountain road. Wind whistled through the crack, hot asphalt smell rising thick. I stared out the window as trees blurred backward, the rare streetlight flaring and vanishing like a slow-motion reel. I wondered how many homes across this country hold secrets no one dares say out loud. How many wives, how many mothers have sat in a car like me, knowing the betrayal, staying steady while waiting for the truth to surface. Gerald drove faster, sweat beading on his forehead. I could see panic swallowing him. He knew tonight was the turn his game had spun out of control. He exhaled and almost begged, "Marion, I just wanted a new start. You have to believe me." I didn't answer. I stared straight ahead, and then as we turned into the inn's entrance, red and blue lights flashed across the front lot. Patrol cars were already there, lights strobing over brick and wooden fence. In that moment, I knew. Everything Noah and I had prepared for was bearing fruit. The truth was about to hit the table like face-up cards. And Gerald, the man who once laid the inn's bricks with me, would have to face it. No way out. The car shot through the last curve back to the inn, and the red and blue had already washed the whole yard. The flashing lights stuttered across the wood siding, the house walls, the tall pines, and the stone plaque where Gerald and I carved our names over 40 years ago. Mountain wind carried heavy damp and a distant growl of thunder. The porch I knew so well now looked like a stage where the final act was dropping. I gripped my bag strap, stepped out, and the wind whipped my dress around my legs. Wet earth, pine resin, and the metallic smell of police cars mixed into the thick scent of endings. Right on the steps, Tessa was in cuffs. Her pale wrists jerked against bright metal, shoulders shaking. She shrieked, voice sharp, "You've got it wrong. I didn't do anything. A clean, cold click of a weapon behind her cut the line short. Tessa's eyes darted wild. On the porch floor, her fancy leather suitcase lay open. My jewelry pouch, neatly folded documents, and a silver USB stick catching flashlight beams. Next to her, two unfamiliar men were pinned over their SUV's hood. One, bald with a faded tattoo, growled, "I'm just the guy they hired to haul stuff." The other, hair slicked with sweat, couldn't speak. His face was a blur of fear and defeat. Lieutenant Mateo Ramirez stood square on the porch, tall and broad-shouldered, uniform damp with rain. His voice carried through the storm, clipped and clear. "You are under arrest for possession of stolen property and conspiracy to defraud. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can be used against you in court," he signaled, and a young officer in white gloves held up a sealed leather pouch. I recognized it instantly, my chest clenched. Inside, the emerald earrings my mother gave me when I turned 21, the pearl necklace Gerald bought in New York for our 20th anniversary, and the diamond ring I'd kept in the safe since the day Noah was born. Now they were evidence pieces of my life taken and returned in shame. Ramirez lifted another envelope and opened it for me to see. Inside were the USB and copies of transfer papers. "We recovered the code you sent," he said. "These are the forged signatures, the management transfer contracts, and the money moved from the LLC account to a middle wallet. There's no denying it." I looked to Noah. He stood under the porch, hair wet with rain, jacket dusty with wood flecks. His eyes shone in that chaos, relieved and hurting at once. When I stepped over, he wrapped an arm around my shoulders and whispered, "You're here. Everything happened exactly like you said. The police got here in time." I nodded, my throat tight. All the fear, the anger, and the hope I'd held for months broke open, but not the way I'd imagined. No screaming, no tears. Only a deep quiet like a lake after a storm, when everything sinks to the bottom. Behind us, Gerald stepped out of the porch shadows. Red and blue strobes washed his face bone pale. He moved slowly, eyes searching, then stopped in front of me. His voice cracked. "Marion, you have to hear me out. This is all a misunderstanding. I wasn't trying to hurt you." I looked at him for a long time. So many years breakfasts with laughter, Christmas lights, nights by the fire, listening to rain. Now all I saw was a small, shaking stranger. I spoke softly, each word heavy as stone. "This is my house. No one has the right to take it, least of all the person who built it with me." Ramirez stepped forward and motioned to two officers. He said simply, "Arrest the suspect, Gerald Whitaker, as an accomplice in property fraud." Gerald's hands were pulled behind him. The clink of handcuffs rang bright in the night. He lifted his head, eyes locked on me, no trace of the old confidence, only a flash of fear and too late regret. "Marion," his voice broke, "I never wanted it to end like this." I didn't answer. Words meant nothing now. Some betrayals can't be patched with apologies. I watched as they led him to the car, and the metal door slammed, one hard thud sealing a life we'd shared that had rotted long ago. As the car rolled out of the yard, I stood under the pine porch. Rain thickened, hitting the roof, the steps, and my shoulders. I didn't wipe it away. The cold drops felt like a final washing, rinsing off the grime of the years I'd been deceived. Noah came close and set his jacket over my shoulders. I felt my son's warmth, the resolve in the way he stood beside me, not the child who once feared thunder, but the man who had walked with me through the biggest fight of our lives. I squeezed his hand and whispered, "It's over now, Noah." He nodded, eyes fixed on the pines. The tall trunks stood firm in the rain, branches swaying in the wind, their rustling steady like a farewell song for a marriage that had just ended. In that moment, I felt they were speaking for me. It was time to close the door. Lieutenant Ramirez turned back, his voice low but kind. "Mrs. Whitaker, I'll be honest, very few people stay as composed as you did. In most cases, folks either fall apart or let their emotions wreck the plan. You saved yourself and your property. I gave a small smile, my breath fading into the damp air. I only did what I had to do to protect this house, I said. My house and my son's. Ramirez nodded, gave me a brief farewell, and walked off, his shoes printing the wet ground. The police cars left one by one, until only the porch light's pale glow and the steady rain remained. I stood there a long time, looking at my house in the dark. The wooden frames, the steps, the old roof, everything was still there, still solid, like my own heart after all the storms. I realized I didn't need to collapse to be pitied. Sometimes silence and resolve are the only answers a betrayer deserves. A final gust blew through, carrying the warm resin scent of pine, like the old season saying goodbye. I lifted my head, drew a deep breath, then gently closed the porch door, my chest lighter than it had been in years. The next morning, Asheville seemed to wake up to my news. The Asheville Daily Chronicle ran a bold headline: "The Blue Ridge Hearth Case, a shock in the heart of a historic town." Just below was the familiar photo, the front of my house in stormlight and police flashers. A small caption read, "A small but complex property fraud investigation tangled with family, corporate ties, and trust." I sat in the living room, coffee cooling in my hand. Noah set the paper on the table and said carefully, "Did you ever think you'd be on the front page, Mom?" I shook my head with a tired smile. "No, but at least the truth has a name." In the weeks that followed, the truth peeled back in layers. Piece by piece, the picture came into the light. Police released preliminary findings. Tessa Miller, her real name, had been a mid-level employee at Summit Vista Holdings, tasked with scouting and persuading owners of promising properties. In old files, there was even a photo of her at a project launch in Denver, beaming as she shook hands with one of the company's vice presidents. The two men arrested that night confessed as well. They'd been hired to clear out documents and jewelry for a few $1,000s in cash. "We just did what we were told," one statement read. "We heard the place was about to be handed over to a new owner, so it had to be cleared fast." I reread that line in the report, my hand tightening. Handed over to a new owner. They said it like an auction lot, not the home I'd built with my youth. Gerald was held for a few days, then released on bond awaiting trial. On the first court day, he walked in with his head down, gaunt face, stubble, eyes empty. I sat in the back row among a thicket of cameras and reporters. As the prosecutor read the charges: fraud, forgery, and aiding an unlawful transfer of assets, my heartbeat slowed. Gerald's lawyer cited a late-life crisis, said he was lost after retirement, and that Tessa exploited the emotions of a man searching for meaning. I looked down at my hands, not angry, just quietly sad. The man I once loved was being excused with cheap lines. He admitted part of the wrongdoing, hoping for leniency. I didn't look at him again. When the gavel came down, everything between us was truly over. Meanwhile, Avery and his financial team kept tracking the money drained from the Whitaker Hearth LLC account. After weeks, they identified nearly $2 million routed through multiple layers: shell companies, an account in the Caymans, then back to the U.S. Most of it was frozen in time thanks to the emergency court order. Avery filed the very day we set the trap. If we'd been a night late, they would have moved it all, Avery said, relief and fatigue in his voice. I just answered softly, "It's all right, some of it's gone, but the part that matters most is still here." What mattered most wasn't money, it was the house. The divorce moved quickly. Both sides wanted it done. I signed my name again, steady, not angry, just ready to close the chapter. When the judge read the final clause, "Blue Ridge Hearth Inn is recognized as a county heritage property. Any sale, transfer, mortgage, or restructuring must go through the Heritage Commission and have the consent of the legal owner, Mrs." Marion E. Whitaker. I looked up, feeling as if someone had laid the last brick to rebuild my life's foundation. After court, life slowly found a new rhythm. Noah and I sat in the living room, papers stacked in neat piles. "I think we should reopen Hearth Inn with a more welcoming angle," Noah said. "Not just a place to stay somewhere people can feel the history and hear the stories." I looked out the window, late sunlight over the pine porch, warm as those early years after Gerald and I married. "Hearth Inn has always had a soul," I said. "We just need to light it again." And we did. We reopened after 3 months of touch-ups, no flashy upgrades, no new sign. Just a small board by the door. Blue Ridge Hearth Inn, a place to come home to. Strangely, after all that turmoil, more guests arrived. Some came out of curiosity, but most stayed because they felt something real. They didn't ask me about the scandal. They asked about the stone walkway, the smell of morning waffles, the old fireplace I still light on winter nights. A young reporter came to write a house that survived a con piece. I just smiled. If you write it, write about stubbornness. Write about how a house can stand when the people inside don't fall. Noah and I didn't blast ads. We shared our story with kindness and details. Word spread, and Hearth Inn became a warm stop in the Blue Ridge. One day, I got a letter from the local culinary school. They asked if I'd partner on an internship program, students learning and serving guests. I said yes immediately. Each season, new young faces filled the kitchen, bright with laughter. One afternoon, I watched a brown-haired girl carefully set waffles on a tray. I told her, "Don't be afraid to mess up. Here, everything can be fixed, even small mistakes." She smiled, and I realized I was teaching what I had learned through tears. Perseverance. Hearth Inn settled back into its old rhythm, but it wasn't the same. It wasn't just an inn. It was proof that honesty and grit can survive. Many guests said they felt it as soon as they stepped onto the porch. I believe them. Every plank, every brick, every line in the guest book holds the spirit of what I fought for. Every night, once the house quieted, I walked the pine hallway. Warm yellow light pooled on the ceiling, my shadow stretching long across the old posts. I ran my hand along the wood, feeling each rough grain and hairline crack time left behind. They weren't flaws anymore, they were witnesses of endurance. Softly, almost to myself, I said, "I kept the house. I kept Hearth Inn, kept my honor, kept my peace. I kept my son's trust, the one thing money can never buy back." And when the mountain wind came down through the pines, I heard an answer in their whisper, gentle and steady, "And the house kept you too." That morning, fog draped the Blue Ridge slopes. Early winter air carried the damp scent of earth and fallen leaves, sad and warm at once. I was steeping peach tea when I heard a soft knock, 3 slow taps, hesitant, like the person outside wasn't sure. When I opened the door, a woman stood on the porch, a gray wool coat around a thin frame. She lifted her head, eyes deep and tired, but her voice steady. "Mrs. Whitaker, I'm Elaine Barlow, Tessa's mother." I stood still for a few seconds, then invited her in. No anger, just a distant feeling, like seeing a piece of my past I hadn't closed yet. We sat at the porch table where I'd shared so many mornings of coffee with Gerald. Weak sunlight slipped through the pines, mottling the tabletop. Elaine held the teacup. I set down, her hands trembling. "I know I have no standing to be here," she began, "but I need to apologize. I raised a daughter who was too ambitious. When I saw her succeed, I blindly believed any sacrifice was worth it. I didn't see the darkness in her until it was too late." I stayed quiet. Wind moved under the eaves, like the house sighing. Elaine said Tessa had always wanted to be above others. When Summit Vista hired her, Elaine proudly told neighbors her daughter worked for a major company. Then came expensive gifts, unexplained trips, and the growing cold in Tessa's eyes. That's when she understood her daughter had slipped too far. "You can hate me," Elaine said, voice catching, "but I'm not here to excuse her. I'm here because I know a mother's loss, and I want you to know, I never taught her to betray anyone. I exhaled softly. Years of anger and contempt aimed at another woman faded like smoke. I couldn't say I forgave, but I didn't hate anymore. We drank our tea in silence. The peach sweetness and warmth seeped into my chest. We talked about Mother's long winters, the nights waiting for a door that never opened, meals going cold around an empty chair. Elaine looked at me, kind and hurting. Maybe we're not so different, Marion. The difference is you still have your home. I lost my child. I held her hand gently. Not to erase the past, but to acknowledge that a mother's pain wears the same colors. When Elaine left, I watched her fade into the fog and knew it was a meeting that needed no forgiveness to lighten the heart. In the days after, I noticed Noah smiling more. He talked often with Harper Quinn, a young architectural researcher staying to study historic timber work. Harper's soft brown hair and bright eyes followed a thick notebook everywhere. She spoke with excitement about mortise and tenon joints, about how the hearth-in porch was designed to catch morning sun and shed afternoon rain. I watched them on the porch, Noah leaning in to listen, Harper smiling, her voice moving like music. In the dimming light, they looked like two people rediscovering something lost. My heart, tight for so long, began to unclench. As for me, I relearned how to be alone without feeling empty. I started my journals again, not to complain, but to note small things: the smell of cinnamon toast, the kettle's first bubble, the wind threading through pine needles. Sometimes I sat by the fireplace for hours, writing a short line. This morning the inn smelled like baked apples. Winter is here. Writing told me I was still living, still breathing with this house. One Saturday night, a folk band asked to play in the backyard. I said yes, only asked them to keep it gentle so guests could rest. But when the mandolin began and hand drums found a beat, people gathered, laughing and tapping their feet. Under the string lights, faces lit up, smiles passing from one to another. I stood on the steps and felt the inn breathe alive. Joyful. After years of strain, I finally felt truly at peace. That night, I called Noah into the office. I opened the old wood cabinet and took out the brass-locked box I call our treasure of keepsakes. Inside were yellowed photos, a silver spoon engraved with my mother's name, a few old letters from Gerald back when he was the man I loved, and the first notebook from when we built the inn. I handed Noah the key. "Not to burden you," I said, slow and sure, "but to root you. If you ever lose your way, open it. Every piece in here is a shard of this house's soul." Noah took it, eyes wet but grateful. "I promise I'll keep it the way you kept Hearth Inn." I smiled. I believed him. Late that night, once everyone slept, I stepped onto the porch again. A low crescent moon hung over the ridge, the wind bringing back the resin scent I knew by heart. I asked myself, if a letter came someday from Gerald, from Tessa, or from the girl I used to be, would I read it? I don't know. Maybe I wouldn't need to. Sometimes healing doesn't come from answers, but from learning to be quiet, to touch the present, and to smile. One early spring morning, dew still heavy on the lawn and daffodils just breaking the ground, the mail carrier handed me a thick envelope. The return corner read clearly, "North Carolina State Prison." My heart dipped. My hand shook as I opened it. Inside was a letter from Gerald. The handwriting, though shaky and slanted, was unmistakable, the same hand that once signed so many inn documents. He began with an apology, no excuses, no defense. He wrote, "Marion, I don't expect forgiveness, only that you read this. I was afraid of getting old, of people seeing me as useless, and I got obsessed with the idea of starting over. Only when I sat in a small cell and stared at a tiny square of sky through bars did I understand what I'd lost wasn't money. It was a home, a family, and you." I read slowly, hearing his old, low voice in my head. He wrote about the emptiness of jail nights, only metal sounds echoing back. He said the hunger to begin again blinded him, and the price was everything real. I sat on the lawn by the porch, the raw green scent of spring grass in the air. I read to the last line, then folded the letter carefully, like a keepsake finally put away. Inside, there was no hate left. Forgiveness, to me, doesn't mean forgetting. It means setting down the burden of anger on the old road and walking forward. I haven't forgotten what Gerald did, but I chose not to carry the rage anymore. On the town's spring market opening day, Noah Harper and I set up a small Hearth Inn booth. Harper led a group, telling the story of the roofline and the foundation stone set in 1982. Noah introduced a new menu, pecan pastries and honey peach tea flavors that make people feel welcome. I sat on the porch, watching the crowd flow in, hearing laughter and talk, feeling life return around me. I hung a new wind chime under the eaves. When the spring wind moved through, it rang and mingled with the pine's whisper. It was the sound of each new day, the sound of the freedom I'd fought to keep. That night, the backyard glowed. Guests circled the wood tables, children ran, a folk guitar strummed under a plain, honest voice. I stood in the middle of the yard, filled my lungs with warm pine and wood smoke, and listened to the wind against the porch and the bright bursts of laughter. Peace rose in me rare and full. I understood. The life ahead is mine and belongs to the people I truly love. No more shadows, no more schemes. Only endurance, renewal, and the faith that even after the longest winter, spring returns. And if you, the one listening to my story, have stayed with me to this point, I want to say this from the bottom of my heart. Thank you for sitting by the Hearth Inn fire, for hearing the storms and the calm that followed. May I ask, where are you watching from? A small town in America, or somewhere far away? Leave a comment and tell me what you think about justice and starting over. If you feel a connection, if you want to come back to this hearth each week where I'll keep sharing true stories from the heart, please hit subscribe and leave a like. Your company warms my whole yard and carries this wind chime song a little farther on the breeze. I bow in gratitude. Because of you, this journey isn't lonely anymore. The restaurant glowed golden. Wine glasses chimed to celebrate my daughter-in-law's new title. I stood at the host stand, my son right beside me. My daughter-in-law leaned in and said softly, sharp enough to slice the room open, "You were never part of this family." My son froze for a beat, then looked away. A few guests glanced over, some frowned, others pressed their lips in pity. I stood stunned, my face burning, my throat locked with shame. She added, dripping with sarcasm, "Remember to heat the leftovers in the fridge. Don't waste food." I couldn't breathe thinking of the shirt I'd just ironed for my son this morning and the down payment on the house that's in my name. I let out a bitter laugh. As the promotion party music swelled behind me, I stepped outside, letting the Santa Fe night wind rake across my burning cheeks. Inside, the pain cooled, making room for a frightening, icy clarity. I went home, took off the old earrings, opened the safe, and pulled out the file I'd quietly kept for 3 years. And by tomorrow she would learn that some dinners are never reheated and some mothers, when they fall silent, are just beginning to collect every debt. If you're still listening, tell me where you're watching from. Every comment you leave is another mark in this journey. And if this story has touched you, don't forget to hit like so it can reach even further. My name is Caroline Pierce, 63, living in Santa Fe, New Mexico, in a cream-colored 2-story house I helped my son buy 3 years ago. That night, with the Mirador's music still echoing somewhere in my head, I sat at the kitchen chair, staring at my phone glowing with a text. "Suegra, remember to heat the leftovers in the fridge. Don't waste food." That line spelled out plainly meant, "Mother-in-law, remember to heat the leftovers in the fridge. Don't be wasteful." No, thank you. No exclamation point. Just a cold command, like I was the help. I looked around the kitchen where everything shined, every tile one I had picked myself. All of it bought from my savings after selling the small house where my husband died. Back then, Ethan told me, "Mom, sell the old house. It's too lonely by yourself. Come live with us, Madison and the kids. It'll be happier for everyone." I believed him. I believed I was stepping into peaceful years close to my grandkids, cared for and loved. But tonight, in this bright kitchen with that message blazing on my screen, I understood. I had never belonged to this house. I stood up and took a deep breath. No crying, no shouting. I began clearing the table, each motion like gathering the last pieces of my pride. Glasses rinsed, towels hung, stovetop wiped dry. I opened the fridge, looked at the half-eaten rotisserie chicken and a few cold fries, and chuckled. Madison was right, I wouldn't let them go to waste, just not the way she imagined. I walked to my room and turned on the desk lamp. On the shelf sat a photo of my husband, Robert, who passed 8 years ago from a stroke. "Robert," I whispered. "I kept my promise. I've taken care of our son like you wanted, but maybe it's time I take care of myself again." His eyes in the frame were as gentle as ever, and I knew he would understand. I opened the safe and took out a thick, brown-bound file with worn corners. Inside was everything: bank statements, transfer receipts, a photocopy of the purchase contract, and most important, the property deed with my name. Caroline Pierce, not Ethan's, not Madison's. I'd kept it that way as a just in case, a cautious habit after a lifetime in accounting. Only I and attorney Harold Kemp knew this. I opened my old laptop and plugged in a silver USB. On it were 17 recordings I'd saved over the past 3 years, conversations I overheard when they thought I wasn't there. Madison had told a friend, "It's like having a free maid. She cooks, cleans, and watches the kids." I don't even have to thank her. No translation needed, every word cut like a blade. I didn't delete them, I saved them because I knew I'd need them one day. Then I opened another folder. Photos of receipts, statements, transfers, every dollar I'd spent since selling my old house. Each image was proof of a sacrifice dismissed. I dragged them all into a new folder named Freedom. Then I wrote a handwritten letter to Ethan, each word heavy as stone. "Ethan, my son, love does not mean letting others trample you. I've been silent too long, and in that silence I lost myself. I'm leaving not out of anger, but to survive. On the table are papers you need to read carefully. This house, son, is not anyone's trophy, it is my blood and tears. Read closely before you use the word family. Mom." I set the letter neatly on the dining table beside a copy of the deed and a stack of financial statements. Light from the glass pendant lamp splashed across the page, making the last line, "Read closely before you use the word family," gleam like a warning. Before I left, I opened the closet and took the deep blue suitcase Robert and I carried on our last trip to Maine. Inside, I packed a few clothes, my journal, medications, and our old wedding ring still shining. Then I looked around the room. Everything was oddly quiet. I walked to the kitchen, pulled the house keys off the hook, and gripped them tight. Not because I was afraid to lose them, but because I knew these keys would be my final statement. I am the only one with the right to enter this house. I picked up my phone, scrolled through contacts, and called Martha Lane, my closest friend for over 20 years, the one woman I trust. Her voice trembled when she heard me. "Caroline? Goodness, your voice sounds odd. Is everything okay?" "Martha, I need a place to sleep tonight, just one night. You always have a room here. Come over, I'll make coffee." Her voice felt like a warm blanket on a cold night. I ended the call, then dialed Avery Pierce, my niece, an attorney specializing in family property. I'd hinted at a few things before, but tonight I was clear. "Avery, can you meet me tomorrow morning? We need to talk about the house. Aunt Caroline, of course. I'll prep the documents. Nina M." At my office, okay? Okay. And Avery, don't tell anyone. This stays between us. The last call was to Harold Kemp, who handled the transfer paperwork 3 years ago. His voice was gravelly but steady. Mrs. Pierce, your documents are fully valid. That house is in your name. No one can transfer it without your signature. Thank you, Harold. I just needed confirmation. I hung up and, for the first time in years, felt genuinely at peace. Before leaving, I walked through each room, touching the sofa, the family photos on the wall, the oven still carrying the scent of leftovers. I took it all in one last time, as if closing a chapter. The clock read 11:45 p.m. I rolled my suitcase to the door, locked up carefully, then pulled the key and slipped it into my purse. The click sounded dry but weighty. Outside, Santa Fe was hushed. I looked up at the sky washed in silver moonlight and took a long breath. The night wind carried the scent of lavender from the neighbor's yard. I started walking, each step lighter than the last, and inside I knew, tonight I'm not leaving to run, I'm leaving to take my life back. I turned to look at the house, the living room lights spilling through the window like empty eyes. I whispered, "Sleep well, my house." And as I stepped onto the sidewalk, my shadow stretched under the street lamp, carrying what remained, one mother, one suitcase, and the keys to reopen her own life. 3 years ago, I lost Robert, my husband, the man who shared over 40 years with me. He passed after 6 months fighting pancreatic cancer. Those 6 months were the longest, most painful, and quietest of my life. Every morning I made coffee and set an extra cup by mine, even though he'd never drink it again. The house in Albuquerque, where we raised Ethan, held only the tick of the wall clock and the chill seeping through the windows. I got used to waking early, drawing the curtains, and murmuring, "Good morning, Robert," with no one to answer. Robert's funeral was on a skin-biting February day. Everything slid by like a slow-motion film, the scent of white chrysanthemums, church music, Ethan's hands on mine without warmth. Madison stood next to my son in a black coat, face properly solemn but eyes far away. She laid a bouquet of roses on the casket and said softly, "Rest in peace, Mr. Pierce." It chilled me. Mr. Pierce, not Dad. A small distance, just enough to pull my heart down. After the funeral, I returned to our old 2-story place in Albuquerque. Every room was a memory. The burn mark on the kitchen table from the time Robert forgot the stove, the living room wall where Ethan once scribbled with crayons, the armchair where Robert read the paper every Sunday morning. Everything was there and empty. I cooked less, ate less, spoke less. Time sifted like sand through the old hourglass, and sometimes I wondered if the world might forget I still existed if I stayed still long enough. 2 weeks later, Ethan and Madison visited. They brought tulips and a lemon cake Madison called homemade, though I recognized the bakery taste. They sat in the living room, speaking gently, trying to sound caring. I knew they worried, but Ethan's eyes held something else, as if he'd come not just to see me, but to deliver a rehearsed line. "Mom," Ethan began, his voice soft but hesitant. "Madison and I bought a place in Edgewood near my work. It's big backyard and there's a room just for you. I don't want you living alone in this house forever." Madison smiled, her fingers lacing with his. "That's right, Mom. We're worried you're too lonely. Come live with us like a real family." I looked at them, my son and the younger woman he adored, and my dapped heart melted. After the funeral, loneliness had gnawed at me. The idea of living with them, hearing the kids laugh, cooking dinner every night, it made my eyes sting. "Are you sure?" I asked quietly. "I don't want to be a burden." Ethan grinned. "Burden? Mom, this house is your home too. We'll live together just like before." Those words, warm as they sounded, became the beginning of everything. Madison pulled out a printed packet saying they were short about $120,000 for the down payment to hold the house. "The market's insane," she said with an awkward laugh. "A little more, and we're there. Ethan looked at me, eyes pleading. Mom, I know you have some savings. If you sell this house, we can cover the down payment. Then you move in with us, you won't have to worry about anything. I sat silent for a long time. This was the place where Robert and I started with nothing. Every corner was our effort, our memories, our breath. But looking at Ethan's eyes, hearing him say we, I saw our family reborn after grief. So I nodded. 3 months later, the Albuquerque house sold. After expenses, I had exactly $120,000, just enough for the new place in Edgewood. I went to attorney Harold Kemp's office, the man Robert and I had worked with for years. He peered over half-rimmed glasses, voice firm. Caroline, if all this money is yours, I recommend the house be in your name. You can transfer it to Ethan later, but for now, protect yourself. I was surprised. But it's my son's house. I'm just helping them buy it. Harold gave a small, sad smile. Trust me, Mrs. Pierce. Help, yes, but keep the paperwork clear. The world changes faster than people's hearts sometimes. I took his advice, and maybe that was the wisest decision I ever made. On signing day, Ethan read every clause. When Harold asked, "The temporary owner of record will be Caroline Pierce, correct?" Ethan answered immediately without hesitation. That's fine, Mom. This house is ours. Ours. I remember those 2 words. They made me trust, relax, believe nothing could shake a bond between mother and son. The Edgewood house was brand new. White walls, red tile roof, green lawn. My room was downstairs, small but bright, with a window facing lavender. Madison said, I picked this room for you so it's easier to get around. I was touched, not knowing the real reason was to keep me far from the primary bedroom upstairs. Move-in day, Madison cooked the first dinner. Pasta with mushroom cream sauce. She beamed, raising a glass of wine. To a new beginning. Now we're a real family. I raised my glass, believing every word. I didn't know that wine was my farewell to an easy life. The first week, I helped unpack, decorate, arrange flowers. The second week, Madison asked me to watch the kids because she had to leave early for work. The third week, a chore list appeared on the fridge. Laundry, dishes, clean rooms, prep dinner, fold kids' clothes. I thought it was temporary help until they settled in, but temporary stretched month after month. Ethan was busy as an engineer, often home late. Madison climbed the banking ladder. And me, I became housekeeper, cook, babysitter, and sometimes a ghost. Mornings, I woke at 6 a.m., brewed coffee, made breakfast. Madison left in office wear with expensive perfume. Ethan tossed out, "Thanks, Mom," and vanished with her. Afternoons, I did laundry, cooked dinner, helped the kids with homework. At night, I heard them talk in their room, sometimes arguing, sometimes laughing, and I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, telling myself, I'm living with my family. I should be grateful. But gratitude thinned into fatigue, then into emptiness. No one asked if I slept well, ate anything, or needed an eye checkup. Only the chore list got refreshed weekly, written, in red marker, slapped onto the fridge. Once, I forgot fabric softener. Madison reminded me in a voice light as silk and just as cold, making my face burn. Caroline, I know you're older, but the house still needs discipline, right? I stayed quiet. I'd learned arguing only made things awkward for Ethan. I wouldn't do that to my son. Slowly, we'll live together, turned into an unsigned contract, my payment in labor, theirs in indifference. I was no longer Mom, but the person in charge of the house. I no longer had a room of my own, only the convenient downstairs space. I wasn't asked for opinions, only assigned tasks. Even so, I believed thought it would change when Madison eased up, when Ethan noticed, when the kids grew. I was wrong. It took 3 years to understand. I wasn't living with them. I was working for them in the very house I'd bought, with my own money. The trap I stepped into made no snap. It closed with sweet words, convincing smiles, and a seemingly harmless promise. We'll live together, I believed. And 3 years later, that belief became the weapon that hurt me most, yet also the thing that would help me win. Every morning the alarm rang at 5 a.m. I got up quietly, careful not to make the wood floors creak. Madison didn't like unnecessary noise. I brewed coffee for Ethan, made breakfast for Noah, 9, and Ellie, 6 fried eggs, toast, orange juice, always to each child's portion. As I set the plates down, Madison stepped out, white shirt, pencil skirt, heels ticking like a metronome. Her expensive perfume flooded the kitchen, drowning the smell of fresh coffee. She never said hello. She kissed the kids and reminded, "No sugar for Ellie, Mom, remember?" Then grabbed her bag, giving me a glance like you'd give a fixture. The door shut, the perfume hanging in the air, making it hard to breathe. Ethan was different. He was as gentle as ever, but gentleness had hardened into silence. Every morning when I poured coffee, he said, "Thanks, Mom," eyes glued to his phone. Words turned to habit, not feeling. I told myself, "He's busy, let it go." But my heart pinched. Maybe nothing is lonelier than being spoken to by someone you love in a voice of obligation. I cleared the table, gathered dishes, washed towels, straightened rooms, tasks chained together with no days off. I used to think helping your children was joy until I realized joy exists only when you are thanked. At night, after dinner, Madison would go to the sink, run a finger along the edge and say, sweet and sharp, "Caroline, the sink isn't clean. There's a watermark here." I stood still, hands wet. Ethan sat at the table, head down, pretending to read the news. No one defended me. No one said a word. Only the kids' laughter in the living room reminded me I still existed in this house. Gradually, I disappeared from every family photo. Holidays, birthdays, Christmas, picnics. Madison would say, "Mom, can you take one for us?" And so, I held the camera. I stood behind the lens, framed them, counted 1, 2, 3, and clicked. In the picture, them smiling, hands clasped, matching outfits. Me? I was the one making sure the shot was straight. When they posted it, the caption was always, "Family time," and each time I looked, I felt a little more hollow. One afternoon, I heard Madison talking on the porch. Her voice was low, but every word carried, because the glass door was cracked open. Old and still living free, like having a private maid. She cooks, babysits, cleans, no paycheck. Who wouldn't want that? I was folding a tablecloth when my hands stopped. I heard all of it, every word, every breath. She chuckled softly, a piercing sound like a wine glass shattering inside me. I didn't cry. Strangely, no tears. I felt a huge silence instead, like the sea at low tide. In that silence, something moved slow and certain. A part of me woke up, the part Robert once called Caroline's backbone. That night, once everyone slept, I opened my nightstand drawer and took out a small voice recorder I'd used back in my accounting days. I put in fresh batteries and tucked it under the lace runner on the dining table. The green light blinked. Everything started then. I recorded every conversation, every belittling comment, every joke with a sting that Madison let fly. She didn't know her voice was stored in my memory minute by minute, second by second. Not just recordings, I began saving every receipt. Whenever I bought anything for the house, new washer, leather sofa set, roof repair after the storm, HVAC maintenance, I snapped a photo and filed it on my laptop. Each file was carefully named: washer 5/22, roof fix 8/23, couch set 12/23. I logged dates, stores, prices, and my signature on the bottom. In the cabinet, I kept a brown leather notebook one Robert gave me for our 30th anniversary. I wrote everything not out of rage, but with an accountant's precision. I recorded every task I did, every expense I paid. I missed nothing. No one argues with numbers, Robert used to say. I smiled and nodded. Exactly. Numbers don't lie. One evening, Madison asked, "Caroline, can you pay the electric bill this time? My card's glitching. I'll transfer it back." I agreed and wrote down the date, time, amount. The transfer back never came. I didn't ask. I added a small note, "Not reimbursed." The days after, I did everything as usual. I cooked, laughed when the kids hugged me. I still took photos for that happy family. Only one thing changed. I was no longer the forgotten one. I was the observer. I was the one collecting proof. One afternoon, while Madison was on the phone with her mother in California, I heard her say, "Mom, I swear I can't stand her anymore. She's like a ghost in the house. Doesn't leave, doesn't talk, doesn't bother, but always there. It's like she's waiting for something." I sat in the living room corner, rolling yarn, gazing out the window. I knew I wasn't mistaken. She had started to fear me not because of what I said, but because of what I didn't. I realized that in silence, a person can become much stronger. I was no longer the weak mother pushed into a corner. I was the one who knew too much, heard too much, and was waiting for the right moment. I hid a second recorder in the laundry room, right above the shelf with the detergent. A third went into the kitchen cabinet, next to the cereal box Madison likes. I carefully changed the batteries every month, deleted the extra bits, and kept the valuable parts. Everything was stored on a password-protected USB drive, hidden in the drawer at the bottom of my suitcase. Sometimes I asked myself, if Robert were still alive, what would he say seeing me like this? He would be sad, perhaps, but he would understand. Because I didn't do this out of hatred, I did it to survive. I still went to the market, still brought flowers home for the dining table, still cooked full dinners like a devoted mother. But when the afternoon light spilled through the window and lit up the family time frame on the wall, all I saw was a blank space where I should have been. No one took a single photo of me. No one asked, "Do you want to be in the picture?" I slowly vanished from every trace of my own family, as if I had never existed. But they didn't know that while they erased me from the photos, I was rewriting the story my way, with numbers, with audio files, with little documents they dismissed. And then one day, when there was enough, I knew I would no longer be the one holding the camera. I would be the one exposing the whole picture. The mirador sparkled with lights, crystal chandeliers glittering from the ceiling, red wine glowing in glass. The room was full of laughter, smooth jazz, and the clink of spoons on porcelain. That night, they threw a party for my daughter-in-law, Madison Pierce, promoted to Regional Operations Director. A title everyone called admirable. I was invited at the last minute when Ethan blurted out, "Mom should come too, right?" Madison just smiled. "Of course, if you'd like." It sounded polite, but the tone made me feel like a mismatched accessory. I chose a navy blue dress, the one Robert used to say, "Makes you look 10 years younger." I ironed it myself that afternoon and prepared a small gift wrapped in silver paper. A Parker fountain pen engraved, "To Madison, congratulations." I wanted a peaceful evening, even though I held back many words. I didn't know it would be the night that ended all my faith in what they called family. When I walked in, Madison stood in the middle of the crowd, light hitting her hair, making her look like an actress at a movie premiere. People laughed, raised glasses, and made toasts. Ethan stood by his wife, his smile a little strained. I came closer and gently set the gift on the table. "Congratulations, Madison. I'm proud of you." She turned, her smile like a razor. "Oh, thank you, Mom. Did you find a seat?" Her voice was sweet, but her eyes didn't bother hiding the irritation. A server stepped up and asked for the reservation name. Madison handed over the list, 4 people. Madison, Ethan, Noah, Ellie. "Not me." The server hesitated. Madison tilted her head, voice low but cold. "It's fine. She's just tagging along. She was never part of this family." That sentence can destroy a mother or wake her up. For me, it did both. What do you think? How cruel can a sentence get before you're forced to walk away? Leave a few lines below sometimes. A single share is enough for someone to feel heard. Every sound in the room seemed to pause. The music still played, but I couldn't hear anything except my heart racing. Ethan froze, then pretended to study his wine glass. A woman at the next table turned to look at me with pity. It felt like being stripped bare in front of everyone. I went still, my face burning, my throat locked. I heard myself give a small, awkward laugh just to save face. Ethan said nothing, no defense, not even a glance. He just stood there like a post, hoping if he stayed quiet long enough, it would all blow over. As for Madison, after saying that, she simply turned to the staff and smiled. "Oh, could I get some fresh lemon, please?" Then she went right back to chatting with her coworkers, cheerful as if nothing had happened. I wanted to leave right then, but my feet felt glued to the floor. Ethan lowered his head and murmured, "Mom, don't mind her. She's had a little to drink." I looked at my son. That sentence hurt more than Madison's insult. As the dinner wound down, she laughed loudly, raised her glass, then turned to me, voice smooth and mocking. "Oh, Mom, remember to heat the leftovers in the fridge. Don't let them go to waste." The whole table burst out laughing, some probably out of politeness, but I heard a drawn-out "ha ha ha" from one of her coworkers. I sat still, my hand gripping the table's edge until my knuckles went white. In that roar of laughter, I felt myself vanish, as if the whole world had agreed I didn't deserve respect. I inhaled. In that moment, something inside me went dark. Another flame, small but stubborn, flared up. I didn't scream, didn't argue, didn't cry. I just stood, placed my napkin on the table, and said softly, "Thank you for the dinner." Then I turned and walked out of the restaurant. The Santa Fe night was cold and dry, carrying dust and a hint of lavender from the cafe across the street. The warm light washed over my face, and I realized I was trembling not from the cold, but from anger and clarity. I walked slowly to the parking lot, my hand gripping my purse. Inside me, humiliation had hardened into resolve. I whispered, like speaking to myself, "Enough, Caroline, enough." On the drive home, I turned on the radio but didn't hear a word. My mind replayed Madison saying, "She was never part of this family." The line rang out, steel cold, then dissolved into the night silence. In that moment, I didn't feel pain anymore, just a sharp truth. They had treated me like a stranger for a long time. I was simply the last to admit it. The house appeared under silver moonlight. I opened the door and stepped in without turning on the lights. In the dark, everything was tidy because of my hands. On the kitchen counter, I saw the leftover boxes Madison told me not to waste. I lifted a lid. The smell of cold food hit me. I let out a rough, half-bitter laugh. "No, Madison," I muttered. "Some things, once cold, only make people sick if you reheat them." I flipped the light on. The soft glow fell across the wall of photos. Noah, Ellie, Ethan, Madison, all smiling. And me? I was the one holding the camera. I wasn't in a single frame. Suddenly, I felt light. If they could erase me from the pictures, I had the right to erase them from my life. I sat at the table, took off the old earrings Robert had given me, then opened the safe. The thick file lay still, as if waiting. I pulled out each item: the house deed, shopping receipts, bank statements, a photocopy of the contract, the USB with the recordings. Every sheet testified I wasn't freeloading in my own home. I arranged everything neatly in a document pouch. Then I opened my laptop and checked the backups. Everything was there: phone recordings of Madison, photos of bills I'd paid, emails I'd sent the roofing company. I moved them into a new folder and named it Tomorrow. Then I wrote a handwritten letter to Ethan. Black ink, steady strokes, no shaking. Ethan, when a mother is humiliated in front of her son and he stays silent, family stops meaning anything. I'm leaving not to run away, but to keep what's left of my dignity. I've left everything you need to understand papers, receipts, and all the things you never noticed. Don't look for me until you're ready to see me as a person, not a shadow in the house. I folded the letter and placed it in the center of the table beside a copy of the deed and the key ring. Next to it, I set an envelope labeled, "For Ethan Only." I stood and walked the house one last time. The curtains I'd washed that morning still smelled fresh. The teacups on the shelf sat exactly where they should. I touched the stair rail, then paused at the window where I used to watch Noah play in the yard. Everything was peaceful, but none of it was mine anymore. I went to my room and packed a few clothes into a suitcase, along with the brown leather journal I'd kept for 3 years. I took only what belonged to me, not much, but enough. When I closed the suitcase, the zipper's dry rasp sounded like the end of a chapter. Before leaving, I looked around one last time. I didn't cry. I just whispered, "Goodbye, my house, the last time I'll call you that." I rolled the suitcase onto the porch and turned on the outside light. The glow spilled over the steps I used to scrub every morning. I locked the door, pulled the key, and slipped it into my bag. The click landed clean and final. The Santa Fe night was cold and dry, lifting a few loose strands of hair. I pulled my coat tight and walked, each step lighter than the last. On the empty street, the streetlights stretched out, my shadow trailing behind like a ribbon. I looked back at the house one final time, the living room light still spilling through the window like hollow eyes. I smiled. Tomorrow, when they come home, they'll find the lights on, the table bare, and a thick envelope in the center. They'll learn some dinners are never reheated, and some mothers, when silent, are just beginning to take everything back. That night, the clock read 1:20 a.m. when their silver SUV rolled into the driveway. The engine cut out, replaced by laughter still tinged with wine and lipstick. Madison laughed loud, her voice high and thin, slicing the Santa Fe night like a narrow blade. "Did you see her face? God! Tragedy on 2 legs!" Ethan didn't answer, only cleared his throat. The door swung open, the porch light spilled across the tile. The house was pitch black, except for that light the habit I'd kept so they wouldn't trip coming home late. Madison stumbled over her own sandals and snapped, "Couldn't she pick up all this junk? It's always a mess." She flicked the switch. The kitchen lit up. But in that moment, her smile froze. The living room was empty, unusually still. No washer running, no smell of leftovers, no clatter of me tidying like every night. The house was clean, orderly, and lifeless. Ethan looked around. My door was ajar, the bed neatly made, the closet empty, only wooden hangers left and a small sticky note. "Thank you for making everything clear." On the dining table, centered under the warm light, sat a cream envelope. Madison frowned. "What's this?" Ethan stepped forward, hands shaking as he opened it. Inside were 3 things. A detailed breakdown of my financial contributions over the past 3 years. A small silver USB labeled "For Ethan," and a copy of the house deed with Caroline Pierce standing out clearly under owner. Ethan unfolded the first sheet. The numbers were typed carefully, exact to the cent. Down payment, $120,000. Roof repair, $14,500. Sofa purchase, carpet cleaning, HVAC maintenance, $8,900. Utilities, taxes, and other support, $41,200. Total, $185,600, all in my name, with receipts attached. Ethan stared at the total, his face draining. He muttered, "No way." Madison snatched the paper, skimmed it, and let out a flat laugh. "Oh, please," she counted every penny. Typical old folks, always thinking money buys affection. Ethan didn't answer. His grip tightened until the edges crinkled. He leaned down, plugged the USB into the laptop. The screen lit up. The first file name appeared. Madison, call 923, MP3. He hit play. From the speakers came Madison's voice, clear, cold, and smug. Just push her into a cheap nursing home and it's done. Your mom's weak. No one's going to check paperwork. Then sell the house, split the money. That'll cover us for a year. Another woman asked, "What about Ethan?" Madison scoffed. "He's easy. Say a few lines about my sacrifice and he'll buy it." Men. The room went dead silent. Ethan sank into a chair, eyes wide, his face colorless. Everything he'd believed defended, kept quiet to keep the peace, turned around and tore him up. Madison stood frozen, then suddenly shrieked, "That's edited! I never said that! She set me up!" Ethan turned to his wife, his eyes empty. "But that's your voice, Madison. No mistaking it. Even the way you laugh. That men line." Madison stepped back, trembling. She tried to raise her voice, as if volume could drown fear. "You believe her over me? You know what she's like, always playing the weak, pitiful act." Ethan didn't reply. He only lowered his head and opened the second file. Madison's voice again, even clearer. "If she gets sick, even better. One competency certificate is enough to have him sign the house over." Ethan let the laptop fall shut and bent forward, hands on his head. For the first time in 3 years, he saw his wife stripped bare, terrifyingly so. The air congealed. Madison stepped forward and grabbed his shoulder. "Ethan, listen. It's not what you think." He shook her off, voice ragged. "Not what I think? For 3 years my mom lived here, did everything, paid for almost all of it, and you called her a burden? Do you know she's never taken place for it? A single dollar from you?" Madison went silent. For the first time, she had nothing to say. The house sank into heavy quiet. Small footsteps sounded on the stairs. Noah, hair messy and eyes sleepy, stood at the railing. "Where's Grandma, Dad?" "Why is it so dark?" Ethan turned back, attempted a smile, but his voice cracked. "Grandma went to rest for a while, buddy." Behind him, Ellie rubbed her eyes, sniffling. "I didn't say goodnight to Grandma." Madison turned away, arms crossed tight, avoiding the kid's eyes. Ethan could only nod, then shut the laptop. He folded the papers and slipped everything back into the envelope. Outside, the night wind kicked up. The curtains stirred. Moonlight slid through the gap, landing on the line, "Caroline Pierce, owner," printed clearly on the deed copy. Madison saw it and went pale. She stepped forward, yanked the page up, and shouted, "She can't do this! This house is ours!" Ethan spoke softly, almost a whisper. "No, Madison, it's hers." Attorney Harold said it from the start. "I just never thought we'd need that." She stood still for a few seconds, then threw the page down, voice tight with fury. "Fine. Let her try. She thinks she can beat me?" But for the first time, her voice shook. Noah walked up to the table, picked the fallen paper, and looked up. "Grandma left this letter for you, Dad?" Ethan nodded, took the envelope back, and tucked it carefully into the document box. "Yeah, buddy. Let Dad hold on to it, okay?" The boy nodded and quietly headed back to his room, leading his sister. The kid's door clicked shut. The house fell into silence. Ethan sat motionless for a long time. Madison turned toward the balcony, panic in her eyes. On the dining table, a wineglass tipped, dark red spilling out, creeping toward the page with my name like a blood-red exclamation mark. As for me, I was asleep on Martha Lane's old sofa. A small lamp glowed through the curtain, pooling, warm yellow on the ceiling. Martha tucked a blanket around me and whispered, "You okay, Caroline?" I smiled, my voice low and light as air. "I'm okay, Martha. For the first time in 3 years, I'm sleeping in a house where no one tells me to scrub the sink." Outside, The Santa Fe night breeze drifted through her lavender garden, its soft scent spreading through the room. I closed my eyes, my eyelids growing heavy. In the quiet, I heard someone, maybe me, in a distant dream whisper, "Justice doesn't have to rush. It only needs to wait for morning." And so, after 3 years of being a shadow in my own home, I slept in peace, the first sleep in freedom. The next morning, Santa Fe sunlight angled through Martha's window. The smell of fresh coffee and toast filled the living room. I sat on the chair, cupping a hot mug, watching the first rays crawl across the wooden wall. For 3 years, I'd always woken early, but this morning, for the first time, I woke without having to serve anyone. From the kitchen, Martha looked over and said softly, "What are you going to do next, Caroline?" I set the mug down. Calm. "Go see Avery. It's time I do the right thing, not for revenge, but to take my name back. Avery Pierce, my niece, is a family property attorney. She's in her 30s, quick, bright-eyed, and steady like Robert when he was young. I met her at the Pierce and Mendez office on Canyon Road, the street known for galleries and craft shops. When I walked in, Avery was already waiting, hair neatly pinned, thin frames on her nose. She stood and hugged me tight. "Aunt Caroline," I heard. "I'm so sorry." I smiled. "No need to be sorry. I'm alive, and I have proof. That's enough." I set the file bag on the table, heavy, thick, and so orderly that Avery looked a little stunned. "Wow, are you planning to sue the whole world?" I gave a small laugh. "No, I just want my place back in the very house I bought." Avery opened the bag and began reviewing each item: the house deed, bank statements, receipts, photos, and the USB with recordings. She went through everything carefully, missing nothing. When she opened her laptop, she plugged in the USB and listened to a short clip, just a few seconds of Madison's voice. "Just push her into a cheap nursing home and it's done." Avery grimaced and shook her head. "Horrible. But it makes my job easier. You have everything: paperwork, audio, spending proof, even lawful ownership. It's all clear." She took quick notes, then continued, "Now I'll contact Mr. Harold Kemp to confirm the file. He drafted the original house paperwork, right?" I nodded. "He knows everything. I want to do this legally and properly, not to demean anyone, just to make them see the truth." Avery nodded and called right there at her desk. I heard Harold's warm, steady voice on the other end. "Oh, Mrs. Pierce, I knew this day would come. The documents are still valid. No one can dispute ownership without your signature. I'll support you fully." Hearing him, I felt a warmth spread in my chest, not joy, but validation. Finally, someone believed me without me having to defend myself. Avery printed a power of attorney and asked me to sign. She said, "You won't need to appear in court. We'll send a cooperation demand before filing suit. If they're willing to negotiate, we can settle this quietly." I asked, "And if they're not?" Avery gave a small smile. "Then they'll have to explain in court why they lived in someone else's house while calling that person a freeloader." I went quiet. Deep down, I didn't want to see my son sitting in a courtroom. I had lost a husband. I didn't want to lose my only child. "Sweetheart," I said softly, "I don't want to destroy this relationship. I just want my dignity back and the ownership of the house that's mine." Avery nodded. "I understand. Will do. This as gently as possible." That afternoon, Avery and Harold drafted the letter. In it, they clearly stated, "Caroline Pierce is the lawful owner of the house. Madison and Ethan Pierce have violated residential rights through property misuse, insults, and defamation. Caroline Pierce is not seeking immediate eviction, only a signed cooperation agreement, asset acknowledgement, and an end to all insulting behavior." The letter was sent by email, CC'd to both Madison and Ethan. When I signed my name at the end, my hand was steady. I reread every line. feeling as if I were closing a door not to imprison anyone, but to keep peace for myself. About an hour later, my phone buzzed. A text from Madison. "Caroline, I'm sorry if anything last night upset you. I was drunk. Hope you don't blow this out of proportion." I read it, then deleted it. Short, cold, and not the least bit sincere. Right after, Ethan called. His voice shook. "Mom, I'm sorry. I was wrong. I didn't think it would go this far. I just want you to talk to me. Please don't get lawyers involved." I went still, staring at the screen with my son's name on it. I didn't answer. I just silenced the phone and set it face down on the table. Outside, evening was falling. I stepped onto the porch. The Santa Fe breeze stirred the purple lavender. Martha brought out 2 cups of tea and asked, "So you really did it?" I nodded, my voice light as the wind. "I don't want to beat anyone anymore, Martha. I just want respect." That night, I opened my laptop and logged into the social account I hadn't used in a long time. I typed one short line. That was all. Self-respect doesn't kill anyone. It saved my life. I didn't add anything. No names, no details, just one sentence, simple, honest. I shut the computer and went to bed. The next morning, Martha woke me with a stunned voice. "Caroline, your post is spreading everywhere." I bolted upright and looked at my phone. Over 800 shares, hundreds of comments from women everywhere. I was kicked out by my daughter-in-law, too. I know that feeling. Thank you for speaking for so many of us. We're not weak, we just love too much. I sat quietly and read each line, feeling both sad and warm. Some women were older than me, some younger, some just sent a heart emoji, but I knew they understood. All my life, I thought if I stayed silent long enough, people would recognize my kindness. Now I understand. Staying silent too long only makes people forget you ever existed. I brewed tea, took it to the porch, and watched the sunlight spill over distant mountains. In my mind, those women kept appearing: mothers, wives, people labeled extra. I realized my story wasn't just about a house. It was about a generation of women forgotten for being too patient. Martha sat beside me and held my hand. "See, Caroline, you didn't just reclaim a house. You're helping the whole world see their worth." I smiled and looked into the distance. "No, Martha, I just told my story. They're the ones waking up." I took a deep breath, let the dry Santa Fe air fill my chest, and closed my eyes. In that moment, I felt free, not because I had won, but because I had dared to speak. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like a forgotten mother. I am Caroline Pierce, a woman who stood up, not for revenge, but to be seen. Attorney Harold Kemp's conference room was on the 4th floor of a small building on Central Avenue, where the scent of old wood mixed with coffee in a strangely calming way. Light from a large window slanted across the oak table, reflecting off neatly stacked files so orderly it felt almost solemn. I sat at the head of the table, facing Ethan and Madison. They arrived together but sat far enough apart to make the air between them colder than the Santa Fe morning outside. Madison wasn't made up like usual. She wore a crisp, white shirt, hands clasped tight on her lap. Ethan looked worn out, stubble on his chin, dark circles under his eyes. To my right was Avery, my niece, calm face, sharp eyes. Next to her sat Harold Kemp, in his familiar gray suit and half-rimmed glasses. He poured me coffee, his voice low and gentle. "Mrs. Pierce, everyone's here. Shall we begin?" I nodded, warming my hands on the cup. Avery opened the first file, her voice clear and decisive. "This is the summary of Mrs. Caroline Pierce's financial investments in the Edgewood home, totaling $185,600, including maintenance, repairs, and property taxes. Additionally, Mrs. Pierce is the sole lawful owner, confirmed by New Mexico property records, date signed, July 4, 2022. Madison looked up, her eyes flickering, maybe hoping this was just a bluff. But Harold slid her a copy of the deed and said, "This is the original on file at our office. Mrs. Pierce holds full title, no co-ownership, no third-party guarantee." Silence stretched. Ethan looked at the paper, then at me, his face draining. "Mom, you've been on the title this whole time?" I nodded slightly. "Yes. Harold advised it since the purchase funds were entirely mine. I didn't want to boast, and I never intended to keep it forever, but now, maybe this is the only way we can talk honestly." Ethan lowered his head, hands clasped. I could see confusion and shame in his eyes. He didn't look up when Avery continued. "So today we're presenting 3 options so both sides can reach an agreement without court." Harold opened another file and slid it to Ethan and Madison. His words slow and precise. Option 1, return the house to Mrs. Caroline and move out within 60 days. Option 2, buy the entire house at current market value. We have a preliminary valuation of about $510,000. And option 3, establish conditional co-ownership. Mrs. Caroline holds 60%, you hold 40%, with conditions set by her side. Ethan looked up, voice tight. "What conditions, sir?" I looked at my son, then to Harold. He nodded for me to speak. "The conditions are," I began, steady, "I retain the right to rent out my 60%. I don't want to live together anymore, but I want the house maintained. If you want to stay, you agree all costs and obligations will be split by ownership share." Madison pressed her lips, ready to snap back, but I went on. "And one more thing. Ethan, you and I will do family therapy for 6 months once a week to rebuild communication. Madison, you must do individual therapy. Avery will refer someone. You need to face your insulting, controlling behavior." Madison shot to her feet, eyes blazing. "You're turning this into a joke." "I don't need therapy, I just—" Avery cut in, calm but icy. "If you don't agree, we'll file suit and seek removal from the property. Mrs. Pierce has ample evidence of insult and threats." "I don't think you want that in your legal record, Madison." The room went silent again. The wall clock ticked loud enough to count breaths. Ethan took Madison's hand and said quietly, "Madison, stop. I've been wrong for too long. At least let Mom have some peace." Madison looked at him, exhausted, like someone after a long war. She sat down, head lowered, voice hoarse. "Fine. I agree." Harold nodded and opened the draft agreement. "There's also an addendum. If any party living in the house violates respectful conduct toward tenants or co-owners, a forced sale of the entire property takes immediate effect. Proceeds will be split 60-40. I looked at the paper and felt everything fall into place. No more back and forth, no payback. Fairness now lived on paper, backed by law, no longer depending on anyone's goodwill. Ethan signed first, his hand slightly shaking. Madison signed next, biting her lip. When it was my turn, Harold slid the pen to me. I took it, looked at Caroline Pierce on the signature line, and signed. For the first time in years, my hand didn't tremble. When the pen clicked down, I heard Harold exhale softly. "That's it. Everything's within the law now. No one can dismiss you again, Mrs. Pierce." I nodded. "I don't need their reverence. I just need them to stop." The meeting ended in quiet. Ethan stood and walked toward me. He looked at me a long time, eyes holding something broken and something trying to mend. "Mom, I'm sorry. I let this go too far. I'll do therapy. I promise." I looked at my son and said gently, "Do it for yourself, not for me." Madison said nothing. She only dipped her head, eyes on the floor. For the first time, I saw no arrogance there, only fear and regret. I gathered the files and thanked Harold and Avery. Before I reached the door, I turned back to both of them, my son I'd raised with everything I had, and the woman who once made me feel useless. I felt no anger, no victory. Only a deep quiet settling into my chest, like early spring wind over the desert. Outside, Santa Fe's sky was clear, sunlight pouring gold on the sidewalk. I stopped at a small flower shop down the block and bought a bundle of lavender. Martha always said, "Lavender softens everything." Maybe today was the first day I truly believed that. I looked toward the distance, where the road led back to a house that had been a battleground, now clearly defined by signatures and truth. I took a long breath, a small smile on my lips. Not the smile of a winner, but of someone who got herself back. I walked on in the golden light, my heart light as if the early spring wind were whispering, "Caroline, you're back." 3 weeks after the meeting at Harold's office, the Edgewood house had a new rhythm, if not a new owner. I didn't move back, but I kept my 60%, as agreed. I decided to rent out my share so the house wouldn't sit empty, and so Ethan and Madison would learn to live with others, no longer free to dominate the space. My first tenant was Angela Brooks, a 39-year-old high school teacher who'd recently lost her husband. She had 2 children, Marcus, 13, and Lila, 9, both well-mannered and sweet. When Avery sent me their file, I read every line, then smiled. They weren't wealthy, but they were kind, and I believe that's worth more than any deposit. On move-in day, I was there not to supervise, but to witness a new start. Santa Fe was bright, with a soft breeze through the sage along the fence. Angela arrived in an old minivan loaded with boxes of books, a few potted plants, and a cat named Pudding. Ethan opened the gate. He nodded politely, his voice rough but courteous. "Welcome, Miss Brooks. I'm Ethan. Glad to have you." Angela smiled, warm and genuine. "Thank you. We'll do our best to keep the house as clean as new." Madison stood behind Ethan, her face stiff as stone. She forced a smile, lips tight. I saw the strain in her eyes, a person used to ruling her space, now having to share it. When Angela came over to me, she held out her hand. "Thank you, Mrs. Pierce, for giving us this chance. We're truly grateful." I took her hand, my eyes softening. "Just call me Caroline, and don't thank me, just live kindly. That's enough." Madison shot me a quick look, a crooked smile. I turned to her, my voice light but clear. "And you, Madison, call me Caroline, too. Mom isn't necessary anymore." That sentence froze the air for a few seconds. Ethan said nothing, and Madison gave the tiniest nod, eyes down. I said no more, just helped Angela carry a few boxes. That afternoon, the house filled with footsteps, laughter, and the rustle of packing paper. Lila squealed when she saw her new room's window face the garden. "I can see the lavender from my bed, Mom." Marcus hurried off to help Ethan fix an outlet in the kitchen. I watched from the porch. A strange feeling moving through me, this house, once a place of hurt, now echoed with children's laughter. That evening, Angela invited everyone to stay for the first dinner. She made lemon-baked salmon, simple but fragrant. The scent of lemon and butter drifted through the air, mixing with fresh bread, turning the kitchen once full of nagging into something warmly human. When we sat down, the mood was unlike any meal before. No commands, no cutting looks, just small talk. Marcus sharing about his new school, and Lila giggling as Ellie told her about art class. Madison tried to be pleasant, but the strain showed. When Angela got up to fetch more water, Madison muttered just loud enough, "Wonder if they'll conserve water. This month's bill is going to double." Angela heard it, but she didn't get angry. She just smiled, pulled a printed receipt from her wallet, and set it lightly on the table. "We've already paid our share, Madison. Don't worry." Her voice was calm, soft but weighty. Silence held for a few seconds. Ethan exhaled, then stood, picked up his plate and said, "I'll do the dishes. Sit down." Madison looked at him, surprised, like she was seeing someone else entirely. As for me, I sat quietly, watching the son I thought I'd lost. That small act, washing a stack of plates, was worth more than gold to me. When dinner ended, I stood, thanked everyone, and got ready to go. Angela walked me out and said softly, "You know, this house has a strange energy. I was scared at first, but now I think it's learning to breathe again." I smiled. "It's not just the house, Angela. The people inside are learning to breathe too." After that day, I didn't visit Edgewood often. I let Angela and her family own that space and me. I only needed to know things were moving the right way. But Angela still called every week, sharing small stories I never got tired of hearing. Once, she said, "Today Ellie came over too. Help Lila with art homework." They laughed the whole time. Madison came down to the kitchen, saw them, and just stood there. Then she grabbed a glass of water and turned away, but I could see her eyes were red. I went quiet for a moment, then said only, "Sometimes people just need to witness ordinary kindness to realize how wrongly they've been living." Another week, Angela told me, cheerful, "Noah and Marcus just won the school baseball championship together. Ethan cheered the whole game, and Madison, she brought treats for the team. I think she's changing." I smiled and said softly, "Good. That kitchen is teaching them kindness again." I pictured the kitchen once a battlefield of criticism, now a quiet classroom. Angela teaching her kids to wash dishes, Ethan helping with dinner, Madison learning to apologize when water boils over. Each child's laugh, every small story from shared meals like stitching cracks back together in that house and in themselves. One afternoon, Angela sent me a photo. 4 kids around the table, beaming, with Madison cutting cake behind them and Ethan pouring water. The caption read, "This kitchen is healing." I stared at it for a long time. Not out of pride or gloating, but because I recognized the most miraculous thing in any story. Kindness can grow back even on old ground. One afternoon, while I was watering plants on Martha's porch, Angela called. Her voice was light as air. "Caroline, I just wanted to say thank you. If you hadn't believed in us, that house wouldn't have had a chance to become a home again." I laughed. "No, Angela. Thank you for making it a home. I only rented out bricks you breathed the soul back in." That night, I sat by the window, watching the golden lights blur along the empty street. Inside, I felt a strange peace. I no longer lived in that Edgewood house, but I knew it was alive, teaching people how to love and respect. Outside, the wind carried the scent of lavender, the scent I once thought belonged to loneliness. Now it just made me smile. I whispered, as if to myself, "Indeed, sometimes the deepest lessons are taught in the kitchen, and the tuition for them is the years we kept quiet." I closed the window and turned off the light. The Santa Fe night softened warm and gentle, like the arms of life itself, soothing me, a mother once forgotten, now seen, heard, and understood. The therapy office was in a small building on Cerrillos Road, downtown Santa Fe. Outside, blazing yellow maples. Inside, the air full of lavender oil and pine. On the wall hung a small, carved wooden sign. "Healing doesn't erase the past, it teaches us how to carry it." I stared at that line for a long time before the door opened. Dr. Helen Moore, a family therapist in her 50s, had a kind face and sharp eyes. She gestured to 2 chairs facing each other, with a small table and fresh flowers between them. Ethan sat on the left, and I on the right. No one spoke for the first few minutes. Helen smiled gently. "We'll start with the simplest thing. Ethan, can you say why you stayed silent all this time?" Ethan drew a deep breath. I saw his shoulders tremble. He spoke slowly, voice rough, as if every word dragged along a shame. "Because I was afraid, Mom. Afraid of losing my wife, afraid the family would break, afraid of confrontation. I thought if I stayed quiet, things would fix themselves. But I didn't know. Silence is a form of betrayal, too." I didn't speak right away. Helen looked to me and nodded for encouragement. I spoke in a low, even voice. "As for me, I hurt because I was forgotten, Not because of lost money or a lost house, but because each morning I woke up and felt invisible in the very family I nurtured. I cooked, I did laundry, I kept the peace, yet no one looked at me as a person anymore. Helen wrote a few lines, then said, "You're both telling the truth, but truth alone isn't enough. You're going to write it down not for me, for yourselves. A sincere apology letter. No defenses, no blame, only facts and feelings." I looked at Ethan. He nodded. That session ended in silence, just the scratch of pens and the sound of breathing. I saw my son's eyes redden as he folded his letter. The following week, Helen asked us to read our letters to each other. Ethan unfolded his page, hands shaking. "Mom, I hurt you with my silence. I didn't defend you because I was a coward. I let you be humiliated when all I had to do was speak. I forgot you taught me to stand tall and tell the truth. I'm sorry I let fear grow bigger than gratitude. I don't know if you can forgive me, but I want to start over, not to bring you back home, but so you'll know I'm still your son." I stayed quiet for a long time. Helen nodded toward me. I opened my letter and read slowly, word by word. "Ethan, I don't hate you. I'm just hurt. I once believed love could replace respect, and that was my biggest mistake. I let you see me endure, so you thought it was natural. I don't blame you. I just want you to understand. Love doesn't have to shout, but it must have boundaries. I forgive you, but I won't go back to the old life." Ethan said nothing. He just nodded, eyes wet. Helen smiled. That's a beginning. At the same time, Madison began her own therapy with another specialist. I didn't see her, but Helen occasionally shared brief updates with Madison's consent. She said, "Madison is learning to face her fears. She fears poverty, being looked down on, falling short of her mother-in-law. Since childhood, she's lived in a family that measured people by wealth. That fear made her try to control everything." I listened, feeling both compassion and fatigue. I said softly, "Tell her I don't need her to be perfect. I just need her to be human, not the best, not the winner." Helen looked at me and smiled. "Maybe you're teaching Madison something her own mother never did." In later sessions, Ethan and I began to talk more. Sometimes I cried, but they weren't bitter tears, just release. I told my son, "Ethan, I will never return to that house as a housekeeper. If I visit, I'm a guest. I need boundaries, and you have to learn to respect them." He nodded and said very quietly, "I understand, Mom, and I will." After that, I noticed something change. Each morning, as I made coffee, my phone rang, Ethan calling, "Hi, Mom, have you had breakfast?" At first I laughed, thinking he dialed the wrong number. But he called every day sometimes just to ask whether I preferred tea or coffee. A small thing, but it warmed me. One Saturday afternoon, Noah called, "Grandma, I'm in a play at school next week." "I'm the kind wolf?" I laughed into the phone. "Then I'll come see the first kind wolf I've ever met." The next week, I went to the school, a small stage, warm lights, kids in clumsy costumes. Ethan and Madison sat in the middle row. I chose the back. When Noah spotted me, he waved like crazy. I smiled and waved back. Ethan's eyes met mine, and he gave a small nod, just enough to warm my heart. After the show, Madison came over and said softly, "Thank you for coming." I simply smiled. I didn't need forgiveness, just the truth. A week later, I got an email titled, "From Madison." I hesitated, then opened it. 3 pages, no flourish, no excuses. "Caroline, I was wrong. I thought control was protection and that whoever has more gets more say. I forgot kindness isn't in a marriage contract, it's in how we treat each other. I don't expect you to forget, only that someday you can look at me without feeling pain. I'll continue therapy not to win anyone over, but to learn to live decently." I finished reading and sat quietly for a long time. I didn't reply. I saved the letter not to threaten, but to remind myself people can change, if they truly reflect. The next morning, I stopped by a small shoe shop on the corner. I bought a new pair of sneakers in teal, the first pair I'd bought for myself in years. The clerk asked, "Going walking?" I smiled. "Yes, starting tomorrow morning." And I did. At sunrise the next day, I laced up and stepped onto the gravel trail behind Martha's house. Each footfall beat steady on the path, like my own heartbeat, sure, free, and calm. I don't know what the future holds, but I know one thing for certain. I'm not walking back to where I was. I'm walking toward myself. 6 months had passed since I signed the co-ownership agreement. Spring in Santa Fe had softened. The lavender by Martha's porch bloomed purple again. I lived quietly, journaling, watering plants, walking each morning on the gravel path behind the house, the teal sneakers holding up, like my own steady peace. That morning, while making coffee, I got a text from Madison. "Caroline, if you have time, I'd like to meet and talk. Not about the past, but about a new start." I read it twice, then agreed. Not out of curiosity, but because I was calm enough now to see her differently. We met at a small cafe on Galisteo Street, with clay-colored walls and old wooden tables. When I walked in, Madison was already there, tidy, simple, no makeup, no designer labels. In front of her was a file neatly tied with ribbon. She stood and gave a small bow. "Thank you for coming." I nodded, sat, and waited for her to begin. Madison opened the file and set it on the table. Her voice was lower, softer, nothing like before. "I want to buy back 60% of the house. Here's a 5-year installment plan with reasonable interest and collateral in the form of shares I own in my company. I had my accountant and attorney prepare it. Every term is lawful." I stayed quiet, looking at the papers. Sunlight poured through the window, illuminating the table and highlighting the signature. "Madison Pierce at the bottom," I asked gently, without edge, only sincere curiosity. "Why now?" Madison looked up without flinching. "Because now is right. These 6 months, I've learned a lot. I've lived alongside a woman like Angela, someone not wealthy, but full of self-respect. I've watched my kids be happy. I've watched Ethan change. I want that house to mean what it should, a home, but I don't want it back as a favor. I want it back as a responsibility." Her answer left me silent. Not because I was moved to tears, but because I recognized a different voice in her. No arrogance, no fear, just truth. I opened the file and turned page by page. The numbers, terms, and rates were clear. Madison had done everything properly, like someone who'd grown. I read carefully to the commitment clause. Quarterly payments, no more than 15 days late. Any violation forfeits the right to buy. Cautious, solid. I thought, this is a different Madison. I didn't sign right there. Instead, I called Avery and met her that afternoon to review the contract. Avery arrived with her usual professional calm, read each line slowly, then looked up. "Aunt Caroline, this is a valid contract. Madison hired a good lawyer. The terms protect both sides." She smiled lightly. "Are you going to agree?" I nodded, then said quietly, "There's one last condition I want to add." The next day, we met again at Harold's office to sign. Ethan came, looking calmer and more grounded than before. Angela came too, holding a small bouquet she handed me. "We'd like to stay on as official tenants if that's okay. The house is steady now, the kids have friends, we truly see it as home." I smiled and laid my hand over hers. "Angela, you made it a home, of course." Madison sat waiting for my new condition. I looked at her and spoke lightly but clearly. "I'll sign, but I want one condition. Everyone in the house will have dinner together at least once a month. Not to show off, not to control, just to remind each other a home exists only if its people sit down together." Madison looked at me for a long moment, then picked up a pen and wrote that line into the addendum in a neat slant. Family dinner once a month. She signed and slid the paper to me. Agreed. We owe the kids that. I looked at Ethan. He nodded, eyes full of gratitude. Harold finalized everything, then handed me the pen. Anything else you want, Mrs. Pierce? I shook my head and smiled. No, I have enough. I signed clean, firm, steady. Not because I'd won, but because I'd found light after the storm. That afternoon, as we left the office, Madison stepped closer and said softly, Caroline, thank you for giving me this chance. I answered slowly, I didn't give it, Madison. You made it. I just didn't stand in its way. Angela, beside us, smiled kindly. Looks like you two just closed a chapter where nobody had to die. I laughed. Exactly. Only self-respect got to live again. That evening I went home and made myself chamomile tea. Martha looked up from her knitting and asked, All done, Caroline? I nodded, leaned back, and exhaled. All done. For the first time in years, I feel I don't owe anyone anything, and no one owes me. That night, I slept deeply. No dreams, no jolts. No faces from the promotion party, no knife-edged voice from Madison, no kitchen flooded with tears, only the soft wind on the porch and a trace of lavender. At sunrise, I woke as usual, brewed coffee, and opened the window. The first light poured in, warm as a blessing. I looked toward the hills, where the Edgewood house glimmered through the mist. It was no longer a prison, but proof that every storm can end in quiet if we stand firm. I whispered, as if to myself, Caroline Pierce, you've completed the circle of justice in your life. And I smiled a quiet, steady smile, round as a late spring moon. 1 month after signing the buyback contract, I got a text from Ethan. Mom, this Saturday night we're having our first monthly family dinner, like in the agreement. Could you come a little early? Madison wants to cook herself. I read it and smiled. Time moves fast. What once looked like ashes now was about to become a shared meal. No shouting, no fear, just dinner. A gentle apology from life. That afternoon, Santa Fe glowed with golden light. I wore a beige linen dress and brought a jar of lavender from Martha's garden. Driving to Edgewood, I felt unusually calm. From a distance I saw the old house now painted a warm cream, petunias hanging on the porch, and the fence freshly coated. It looked different, like the people inside. The door opened. Ellie ran out first, ponytail high, chirping. Grandma Caroline is here! Grandma, you have to sit in the special seat! I laughed and hugged her. In that moment, the smell of dough and cheese filled the air, pulling me back to years ago when this kitchen felt like mine. But this time, I walked in as a welcomed guest. In the kitchen, Madison wore an apron, hair in a bun, hands dusted with flour. On the table sat a lasagna straight from the oven, the cheese edges slightly burnt. Angela stood beside her, laughing. A little char is right. I told you my recipe is never perfect, but it's always memorable. Madison laughed too, a bit shy. Then tonight should be very memorable. I looked at the pan, rich and fragrant, blending with garlic bread. Maybe the house had never felt this warm. Ethan set the table while Noah and Marcus chased each other, arguing over seats. I sat in the chair by the window where I used to place myself during lonely mornings 3 years ago. Today, on the seat, lay a small handwritten card. For Grandma Caroline. I brushed my fingers over it and smiled. I finally had a true place in this house. When everyone sat, Angela poured water, cheerful. Let me start, since I'm responsible for the burnt cheese. Laughter around the table. Madison laughed too, then looked at me. Caroline, I followed Angela's recipe. I can't promise it's great, but it's honest. I nodded. As long as you cook with your hands and eat together, it's good. Ethan cut the first slice and shared it evenly. When he handed me a plate, he asked quietly, Mom, I'm thinking about fixing the porch roof. What do you think? You did that with Dad once, so I want your input." I froze for a second, not at the question, but at how he asked. His voice held real respect. I wasn't ignored. I had a voice in my own house. I smiled. "Go with composite, not wood. Santa Fe winds crack wood fast." Ethan nodded and scribbled a note. We ate and talked. Lila and Ellie shared school stories. Noah bragged that his team was in the semifinals. Then he pulled a baseball from his backpack and handed it to me. "Grandma, this is our signed ball, me and my teammates. I want you to have it. You're our good luck charm." I took it, holding back tears. "Thank you, Noah. I'll keep it by the window where the light is brightest." Then Ellie brought out a watercolor, an older woman at a doorway with warm light behind her. Underneath, in crooked letters, "Grandma Caroline, the Keeper of Light." The room went quiet. I set my hand on the paper, voice trembling a little. "Thank you, Ellie. That light isn't mine, it belongs to this house. I just helped it not go out." Warmth returned. Laughter rose again. Madison sat across from me, something different in her eyes, no tightness, just honesty. She set down her fork and spoke slowly, clearly. "Caroline, I want to say this in front of everyone." She turned to Ethan, then the kids. "I'm sorry. I belittled you and hurt you. No reason is enough to excuse it. I just hope to relearn how to be a decent person." No one spoke for a few seconds. I looked at her and nodded. "No. More words needed." "What matters is you said it." Madison bowed her head, and Angela patted her shoulder, smiling. Then Angela looked at me and raised her glass. "I want to say something. To me, Caroline is a wind anchor. She doesn't pull anyone down. She keeps those around her from being blown away." I laughed softly. A wind anchor, sad and beautiful at once. "Thank you, Angela." The meal ended with kids singing off-key, clinking cutlery, and laughter filling the kitchen. There were no victims or villains anymore, only people learning to live kindly again. The next afternoon, Avery stopped by with the first installment payment from Madison. She set the envelope on the table and smiled. "It's small, but on time. Harold says this is a start to what the legal world calls restorative justice. You did what many only talk about." I smiled, taking the envelope without opening it. "I don't need to know how much. I just need to know they kept their word." That evening, I posted a new photo. 2 families, me, Ethan, Madison, Angela, and the 4 kids around the dinner table. Warm light on laughing faces. For the first time, I was in the picture, not holding the camera. My caption, "Respect warms a home, not blood." Within minutes, hundreds of comments and shares. I didn't read them all. I set the phone down, sipped tea, and looked at the image, the light gentle now, no glare, no hidden pain. I opened the envelope and saw Madison's first check. Not large enough for the electric bill, maybe a few potted plants, but the relief went to my bones. That night, moonlight spilled through my window as I closed my eyes. I knew forgiveness doesn't erase the past, but it opens the door for the future to breathe. And in the steady rhythm of my own breath, I saw clearly at last I'd lived long enough to witness what I believe in. Justice isn't always a verdict. Sometimes it's just a chair saved for you at the table, almost 2. Years have passed since the night I left the house in Edgewood. My life now is small, calm, and just enough like my 3rd-floor apartment overlooking Santa Fe's plaza, where mornings are full of sun and evenings fill with street guitars. I get up early, open the window for the breeze, make a cup of coffee, and watch the light climb the Sangre de Cristo range. Far-off church bells ring, mixing with the smell of toast from the corner cafe. My life isn't loud anymore. No sounds of anger, just the slow, gentle beat of peace. I teach a community knitting class at the city's cultural center. Older women gather every Tuesday morning, knitting and telling stories. Some are divorced, some widowed, some still learning how to forgive their children. I listen. then share my own story not to complain, but to show that leaving at the right time is also a way to love. Madison's installment payments still arrive in my account on schedule. I add a little savings and live just right, no lack, no excess. I buy flowers every weekend and pay for the art class I always wanted to take. Freedom at this age isn't flying far, it's standing steady and quiet. Ethan still visits every Sunday. We drink coffee on the balcony and talk about baseball and how Noah is about to start middle school. Madison sometimes texts photos of new dishes. She's trying lasagna, pumpkin soup, honey-roasted chicken, no more orders, just simple sharing from someone who wants to keep a connection. Once she texted, "I remade an old dish but with less salt." Ethan says it tastes gentler, like how I'm learning to talk. I laughed and replied, "Less salt, more heart." Noah and Ellie are growing fast. They send birthday cards and video call every weekend. Sometimes they just say, "Grandma, I love you." That's all, and the whole world warms inside me. The buyback contract is still on schedule, quarter by quarter, as promised. I still keep the right to stop it if anyone forgets. Respect not to threaten, but to remind them that kindness needs boundaries. I've never had to use that right. They understand now. They know respect is the real foundation of a home. On the wall of my small apartment hangs a light wood frame, both families around a dinner table. I'm in the middle, holding a cup of tea, smiling softly. No suspicious eyes, no distance. Just a mother, a friend, a person who stepped out of the dark and found herself seen. It's the first photo I've hung without feeling my heart sink. One evening, while journaling, I wrote to myself, "Thank you, Caroline, for leaving at the right time so you could come back to yourself, for choosing self-respect over silence, for believing love requires limits." I closed the notebook and opened the window. The Santa Fe air rushed in, cool and clean, with lavender and a little desert dust. I closed my eyes and breathed deep. Freedom smells like this: wind, courage, and gratitude. I didn't destroy a family. I made them relearn how to love with limits, with gratitude, with respect. They're still a family. The difference is that now they listen, apologize, and hold on to each other with honesty. I used to be the mother pushed away from the table. Now I'm the one in the middle, listened to and called by name, not because I changed them, but because I changed how I stand. Every morning when the first light pours in, I smile again. Others might just see an old woman living alone in a small apartment, but I know I'm living in a house built of self-respect. If you're still here with me, thank you, truly. Not everyone stays to the end of a story, especially a story about soft wounds the family hurts so many of us have known. If you're hearing this now, somewhere in your heart you probably know what it feels like to be forgotten, dismissed, or to be strong when no one stood beside you. I want you to know you're not alone. Wherever you are, quiet room in New York, a small house, in Texas, or across the ocean if you're listening, I already feel accompanied. Leave me a comment and tell me where you're tuning in from, so I can imagine how far this voice has traveled and how many hearts it's touched. And if this story gave you a bit of warmth or reminded you of the value of respect, courage, and love with boundaries, please like, comment, or subscribe. Not to count views, but so stories like this can keep being told for everyone trying to stand steady in their own storm. Because sometimes a single shared word is enough to warm a heart that's been cold for a very long time.